right, happy Halloween, everyone. It is the Drinker here, and well, it's the evening of spookiness when horror and nasty things that go bump in the night clash together. And well, here we are. And I just thought, what better way to celebrate Halloween than to talk about my favorite survival horror franchise of all time, Resident Evil. I mean, I've made no secret of the fact that I'm a little bit obsessed with it, possibly to the point of like needing help, but what can I say? I've recruited a couple of individuals tonight who are equally obsessed, and I thought, why not spend a little bit of time talking about it, reminiscing about old and new games, and seeing where we end up. So here we are, and I think it's about time I bring them in. So let's bring our guests in for this evening, shall we? First up, we have got Carrier, a Raccoon City story. Now, you might not know this guy yet, but he has been producing some really cool Resident Evil fan videos. I can best describe it as like a graphic novel turned into a video. It's a little bit like the kind of cutscenes you get from the old Max Payne games, but put into the world of Resident Evil. And it honestly looks cool as fuck. Much respect to the guy. He has been doing this with limited resources, but it's been looking absolutely fantastic. So I'm pleased to bring him in. Welcome aboard, sir.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be on here and doing the thing that I love doing the most that annoys a lot of other people, talking all things Resident Evil.
Nice.
Cheers.
Cheers to you, man. And yeah, respect to the outfit as well. You've definitely got the post-apocalyptic look going strong, so I appreciate it.
Post-apocalyptic George Michael. You even got the little...
I like it. Hey, nice. No, that's good stuff, man. I like the outfit. I feel underdressed by comparison, you know?
Nah, it's all about the spirit.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. I got plenty of spirits here, you know? Got this.
Yeah, there we go. I got mine lined up right there too. I've mentioned it before. Shackleton, best of the best.
Nice. Yeah, not bad actually. Yeah, I like it. All right. Well, we've got our other guest this evening. He is pretty well known in the Resident Evil community. He is one of the biggies when it comes to making Resident Evil content, and he's got the smoothest and most relaxing voice on the planet. It is Avalanche Reviews.
Good to be speaking what's to you, up, man. Guys?
Brilliant. I'm just gonna let you talk for the rest of the stream, man. It's great.
Oh, nice.
Morning, right. Jared.
Hey, what's up, dude?
Actually, I think this is the first time we've actually ever spoken to each other, even though you are in an episode of Carrier.
It is like verbally, yeah.
No, it's good to have you on, man. And honestly, I've been a fan of your channel for a long time. Like
Thank you.
The insights that you find and that you provide when you do your reviews of Resident Evil games are just unparalleled. I think it's fantastic. Really enjoy your reviews and your playthroughs as well. You can tell the love that you've got for the whole franchise, man. So it's great to finally talk to you.
Thank you, man. Much appreciated. Thanks for having me.
I gotta say, I found both of you guys strictly through that. It was sitting around like through lockdown and quarantine, just bored looking at Resident Evil stuff on YouTube, and it all just happened to link to Drinker and to Avalanche Reviews. Just I didn't know who you guys were, but you guys had some great stuff. I'm like, hey, I can sit here watching this for hours.
Nice.
It's weird from my point of view, because I guess, you know, if people were to look up my channel, it would probably be relating to, I don't know, you know, Marvel movies or the Rings of Power or something like that, or Game of Thrones. That tends to be how people find me. But yeah, I don't imagine that I'm that known for Resident Evil, but I guess somehow, like, yeah, if you look for that, then it leads to me eventually. So
oh, it led back, like, this is before you did the Captain Marvel video.
So shit, that really old stuff then.
It just popped up. Resident Evil, I think your first one I saw was the Resident Evil 4, the original one, just the review on that. So you could see, I started following you since then, and I could see the gradual change of you slowly becoming the drinker. You can hear one drink after the next.
Slowly become more like cynical and angry and drunk.
Exactly.
I suppose I should ask you guys actually, because I'm always interested how people get into things like this, you know. So I guess for each of you, you know, how did you discover the Resident Evil games? Like, what was the first one that you played, and like how was it you came to, you know, become interested in it?
I can tell you for me, So I kind of grew up not poor, but like I wasn't doing great financially as far as my parents were concerned. So buying a brand new PlayStation was like a pipe dream, never going to happen. But I would look in game magazines and I would see screenshots for Resident Evil specifically, and how the camera was positioned and where the character was. I couldn't imagine. I just tried my hardest to imagine how you would control a character, because it looked to me like it was like all 3D. Like I imagine the controller would need to be like a spherical thing or something for you to control something in real 3D. So that was just, it blew my mind. And one Christmas we ended up getting a PlayStation, and immediately Resident Evil 1 was like the game that I wanted to play, because I had seen it in those magazine screenshots all the time, and I wanted to see what it looked like in motion so I could like finally understand how you could control this game. And then from there, it was just a hole I fell into and just kept going.
Nice. And that was it. Like, that was the first one, the very
Yeah.
first game.
Yeah. It was around the time that Resident Evil 2 was being developed. So I got the first time I ever played Resident Evil was with the director's cut that came with the demo disc for RE2.
Yeah.
And I made the mistake of playing the demo disc for RE2 first, because like, yeah, it's the newer game, right? But that actually got me super interested in like, okay, well, how did all this happen then? So it made me go back and get into RE1. And me and my brother were just obsessed with that game. We'd play it together all the time. And we got to a point in the game, everybody, when you get to the sewers, you have to use the crank once, and then you have to use it a second time in order to open up a door that you can get to. And we just never used it that second time. So we were just stuck in the game. And this is for like, I mean, months and months and months. We were just like, we would boot up Resident Evil. We'd run all the way through the Spencer Mansion, all the way through the sewer. We killed everything. We collected every item. We had no idea how to proceed. And then one day, randomly, I was just trying stuff on stuff like adventure game logic. And I tried to use the crank one more time or two more times or something. And my brother was at a buddy's house, and I called him immediately. Like, you got to get over here. We could beat Resident Evil today. And so from there, we were hooked, and it was just history from then on.
I'll tell you the bit that stumped me for so fucking long, and it's so dumb when I think about it now, but it's like the eagle and the wolf medal. They're hidden inside books when you find them.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize that you could open the books. And so I got to that bit with the fountain where it leads down into the lab. And I was like, why can I not use the book on the fountain? I don't understand what I'm missing here. And it took so fucking long to figure it out. And it's so dumb when I think about it in retrospect. But it's just one of those little things. If you don't realize that you hold the book at a certain angle, you could open it and see what's inside. And it just, it kept me puzzled for a long time. But yeah, man, that was the first game that I played. It was a buddy of mine, Chris. I remember now. I'd been playing I got my PlayStation. I'd been playing things like, I think, Tomb Raider and a couple of other older. Wipeout, I think, was another one that I played. And I was looking for something with a bit more of a story to it. And he was like, there's this new one called Resident Evil. It's great. You get to fight zombies. It's like a horror game. Give it a try. And so I went to like my local Blockbuster and rented it out. Remember Blockbuster, kids? That was a thing.
Man, I remember
used
to be able to rent consoles from Blockbuster.
Yeah,
you could go in there, you could rent like a Sega Saturn, a PlayStation 1. They rarely were ever there. But we started.
That's the only time I ever owned, like in my own room, a Sega CD, is because I rented it from Blockbuster Miami.
Nice. What about you? Post-apocalyptic George Michael.
Man, it's kind of a complex road on that one. So I first got exposed to it late 96, early 97, because it was definitely around the time where they had the second game in development. And growing up, we lived in a little suburb just north of here in South Florida called Boynton Beach. So there wasn't really a lot around there except for like a shopping mall, maybe like one Blockbuster for the whole town. And we were Nintendo kids growing up. So we had a Nintendo 64, and we didn't have it was kind of one of those things where growing up, if you had the money for it, it was one or the other. So we opted for a Nintendo because we didn't know what a PlayStation was. We never heard of it before. And that's kind of all the games we play at home. We had GoldenEye, we had like Star Fox, and our friend who lived a couple houses up the road from us, he was the one with the PlayStation. So we'd always go back and forth. So he'd come over, we play GoldenEye, we go over to his place, and we play like Crash Bandicoot or Tomb Raider or Alien Trilogy. He was also the kid that had a lot of the good quality horror movie collection, all in VHS. I think that was also where I first saw Aliens for the first time in bits and pieces, just not the whole thing. And one day on the school bus home, he says, "Are you guys going to come over and check out this new game I got from the mall? It's called Resident Evil." And at the time, I was like 6, and my older brother was a few years older than me. And I'm like, "That's cool. What does that mean?" Because I was a terrible reader. I didn't know, my vocabulary was shit. So Resident and Evil, and don't know what those words are, but I'll come over. I mean, I didn't have a choice. I was a younger brother, so I showed up. Didn't get to play it because younger brother rules. So I sit in the back of the room and watch while they play it. And then they booted up the first game, and that opening black and white live action cutscene just spoke volumes to me.
Oh, so it hooked you in.
They were only a few years older than me, and they were laughing at how cheesy it was, but not me. To me, it was like watching like a Steven Spielberg level production. Like,
yeah,
the line, the acting, delivery, the borderline anime looking like hair and the costumes. I took it so seriously. It was like, this is insane. And for the longest time, I would keep going back to my buddy's house, even on my own, just like, "Hey, can I play some Resident Evil?" I only be able to get like 40 minutes in at a time because I get too chicken shit, and I'd run out of ammo, run out of resources. And then I'd switch to like Tomb Raider or switch back to something familiar like Tony Hawk, because I'm like, I can't do this. This is too hard. And I never got to beat it because we ended up getting a PC, and it wasn't until late '98 that I found out that they had released they were releasing the games onto the PC. So our last day in Florida, because I'd actually, when I was 8, we moved down to Brazil. Half my family's from down there. So my dad got a contract with his job for us to go live down there for about 3.5 years. And on the last night when we were in the shopping mall before we left, I went into an EB Games, which is where I always fucking went. And I saw there right in the computer section was the big box Resident Evil 1. And I just saw that and I lost my shit. I grabbed it like, "Dad, you got to get me this."
Hell yeah.
Like they knew that I was relatively interested in it. They didn't know much about gaming. So I showed it to him and he's like, "What's that?" It says for mature audience and extreme gore. I don't know if I can get you that. He shows it to the clerk, and the clerk looks at it and he's like, "Yeah, I think your kid's too young for that." Like, "It's all right, put it back." And to me, in my childhood brain, I thought that was the only store it existed in. And so here we are. We pack up and move to a different country. And I'm just like, I could have had
it. I know exactly what you mean, though, about that live action intro, because I was fresh off the Super Nintendo at that point. Like, that was just like, that had just faded out and the PlayStation had come in. And so I was still used to like things like, Donkey Kong Country or Super Mario World or whatever. And suddenly you've got this game that's like, it seems like you're in a horror movie. Obviously now it's laughable, but like back then it was an absolute revelation. Like, you had real actors. And I use the term actor pretty loosely, but like, doing this stuff. And then suddenly you're taking control of the action, and you've got all these cinematic camera angles. And that first time that you meet that first zombie, I just turned around and ran straight away back to Barry.
Dude, that head drop look. I think they had the head drop in the original one. Yeah, because it was the later ones that cut out. But when he drops Kenneth's head, you see like how it just rolls, that weird, awkward, then it just rolls and stops. You see how the face is chewed off. Like, who that, even playing as Chris, because my favorite guy was Chris, right next to Wesker. Because Wesker had blonde hair and I had blonde hair. So I thought, oh, that's cool. I didn't get it far enough in the game to know that he ends up being the villain. So I always thought he was a good guy.
Right.
But Chris, I always picked Chris, and I could never get that far. He started with a fucking knife, and I'm not going to fight a zombie with a knife.
Not
in 1996.
It still blows my mind that people are like, completing the entire game just with the knife. It's
even the original one.
Yeah, like insane levels of skill. Like, I could never hope to equal that. That's just crazy.
I could probably beat RE Remake. No, I couldn't do knife only because of the bosses. I don't know. I mean, people can do knife only runs of Resident Evil so easy. and I could do knife sections, maybe like a few screens with a knife only. But yeah, I don't have that kind of skill. You know what's interesting that both of you touched on, though, that I really like is there was a time that we all kind of shared, maybe 15, 20 years ago, when you could say, hey, did you hear about this new game, Resident Evil? Don't you like miss that? Like this concept, like, hey, did you hear about that new franchise that started up? It's this like brand new thing. It kind of feels like
Word of mouth,
nowadays
man.
everything's so like derivative that hey, yeah, the new Call of Duty, the new Metal Gear, the new whatever is coming out, and we all are super familiar with everything that's happening. But there was like a
Yeah.
time during like the PS1 era where franchises were just starting, like Tobal Number One or Battle Arena Toshinden is like stuff you've never heard of, and someone had to describe it to you. That was a good
And
time.
most
Well, I
most of the
remember like
time
this. Yeah, I was just
most of the time you'd hear about it right before it came out too. You didn't have like this whole
Oh,
track
yeah.
record of here's what we're going to
Oh, for
release.
sure.
Well,
Yeah,
years
yeah.
down
back
the
then there
line.
was, there was no internet to speak of, and so
Mhm.
like I got most of my information back then by actually reading PlayStation magazines. And like had to wait every month to see what the latest update was. And I remember back then even getting super excited because they started releasing screenshots of Resident Evil, well, what would be Resident Evil 1.5, the aborted Resident Evil 2. And I was like, oh man, I can't wait to play this. This is going to be awesome. Like 97 is going to be great. And the year just kind of went by, and then the news dried up. And I was like, what the fuck's happening? Where's this game gone? And it wasn't until like another year later that we finally got what would ultimately be Resident Evil 2. And so that also became a point of fascination for me. Like, whatever happened to that game that we were supposed to get? And obviously,
Yeah, tell me about
now,
it.
now we obviously know what it was and what happened with it. And in retrospect, I can see why they canned it and essentially started again, because I've played through the emulated version and it's not great. It's fascinating to play, but it's not a patch on what they ultimately went with.
I find myself of two minds, because obviously the finished product of RE2 is like fucking legendary. It's so good. But at the same time, I don't know if this is genuine, like I'm judging it as a video game, or if I'm thinking about it with nostalgia, because my early internet access was basically looking up information about RE 1.5, going to like bioflames and stuff. So I have like that's what I associate that with. So I have a little warm spot in my heart for it. But it feels to me certainly more like the first game than the second game. But I would have loved to have seen that come out. I don't know if I would have traded one for the other, because that's a tough one, because RE2 ended up being so good. But like a finished version of 1.5, they had these mechanics like your armor could degrade as you take damage, and you could repair it and upgrade it. They had a whole like chemical mixing system and all kinds of cool shit they were going to do with ammo. It would have been nice to see them roll that version out. But again, like I don't know if I could leave the RE2 we know and love behind to have that reality come to be.
I think it, like, even now Capcom could probably, because I'm sure somewhere on some dusty old server they've got like the original game files, like the dev files for it. They could probably like put in a few months of work, release it, and make a shit ton of money,
I
because
don't
there'd be
know
so
if they
many fans
do.
there'd be so many people who would just be interested to play it. Like,
Mm.
obviously it's not a mainstream release anymore, but like for what it could be, I think there would be that fascination there. But
I mean, I don't think. I mean, it sounds like it's the same situation as with at least the Outbreak files of the Outbreak games. That data is just been lost. Like that is a literal white whale right there with the original files for 1.5. There's a book that this guy, he's a huge Resident Evil contributor. He goes by CVX Freak, Alex Aniel. And he wrote a book called Itchy Tasty, which documents the entire development history of Resident Evil up to about the fourth game. And he goes deep into the side spin-off stories, including 1.5 and Outbreak. I don't recall a lot of the details behind Outbreak, but that's behind 1.5, because that was so long ago. But that existed on some old server that they got rid of. And the same thing was more notable for Outbreak, because for Outbreak, the reason we haven't seen any remaster, any news on that, they lost all the original files. There was a merger in like the the company that made it, that was behind its development, they went through some kind of merger and they just didn't take care of their servers that saved all the data, and they just wiped it all clean without knowing that it was going to be so big later down the road.
Well, I mean, I know that they've you've got the Resident Evil 1.5 like restoration project where people are doing it kind of off their own back, really, for free. And it's, you know, that's how I was able to experience it. And it's the bare bones of a game, but you can see where they had to patch together a bunch of shit that was just, you know, what was available to make it work. Yeah, I suppose they could lift assets from that if they really wanted to. But no, it's an interesting thing to see, though, because you can see the thought process that went into it. Like, I know they were really keen to have more zombies and really like ramp up the action of it. And the way they did that was just to like lower the polygon count of the character models and make it like a bit more simplistic. And you know, the whole design of the environments was much more modern and very like pale and washed out and like very
Speaking on behalf of that, I gotta ask you, because for the longest time when I saw that was going to be the original police department, I just love that design because it felt more grounded, felt more real. Felt like it
was definitely more real,
yeah. But then as I got older, you know, that was probably when I was about 11 or 12 when I started seeing those, and I wished like, oh, I want to see what that looks like. But as I got older, I understood more like the art behind visuals and how something, even if it's not logistically put together well, just as long as it visually encapsulates you, that's what's part of the experience. I much prefer the current RPD over it because it just looks fantastic. But
I think,
do you guys have a preference over which one? Would you prefer to see this more cold concrete interior that we got, or the one we got now?
I'll let Jared answer obviously for himself, but it's like, I think ultimately I prefer the one that we got, partly because it's just more visually interesting just to have environments with lots of details and lots of incidental stuff that you just like, you're interested to see it. It's very much like the mansion from the first game. And partly because it makes it easier to parse where you are in the map. Like, from what I remember, like the 1.5 game that I played, like the emulator, it was like this weird stack of levels on top of each other. And like, because all the rooms kind of look similar, because they've all got like that bland sort of concrete look, it's kind of hard to keep track of where you actually are in relation to everything else. Whereas with the police station that we ultimately got, various sections have got their own unique look to them, and so it's easier to remember where you are and where you're going. And I guess that was the same design philosophy behind the mansion. The two are very similar. Obviously, they played it quite safe with that. I don't know about Jared. Like,
I God, that's tough. RE2 RPD is so good. That like kind of wood aesthetic, like an old library. I mean, it's amazing. And it definitely is more spiritually true to RE1 for sure. But I kind of have a personal preference for that cold, almost like Art Deco cement kind of like a loft apartment looking, just bare cement walls kind of thing. It feels more like a horror movie to me for some reason. Like there's a coldness and an emptiness to it, like that RE 1.5 RPD, that first screen where you kind of see the shutters that have come down. It's a blue color palette, and it's this like,
it's got a very John Carpenter feel to it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And I like that a lot. A lot of like the color grading made it feel very modern, very urban. And one of my big things is seeing kind of horror or fantasy scenarios take place in a very like believably modern urban environment, like a Parasite Eve or Resident Evil 2. I love that stuff. So the look of the RPD in 1.5 kind of speaks to me in more of like a what I like looking at, but it feels really scary to me for some reason. Like there's nobody there. It's cold and empty, and you're alone and isolating. I don't know. It works really well for me.
It's a very cold and oppressive environment.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, it's definitely got that, and so the fact that it does look much more like an actual police station. I think that helps to like immerse you in it a bit more. But in terms of just, I don't know, game environments that are more fun to traverse and like make a bit more sense in your head, like I feel like the version we got probably was the better one. But the They are a really interesting design philosophies. I always I always felt a bit bad for Elsa Walker as well, like this character that never came to be.
Yeah.
I feel like they should have worked her into something just to like make a little reference to her or whatever. But
yeah, they probably just got caught up in all of it because by the time they made that second game, once they switched it over, like, oh, we don't really need this character anymore. I don't think anyone at Capcom anticipated how big RE2 was going to be.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Mikami they wanted that to be their final one, didn't they? Or
yeah, they did.
Mikami did.
Because he doesn't like at that time he like didn't believe in sequels or something. That was what was infamous.
He kind of still doesn't really he never works on any game for more than one entry. I mean, even the Evil Within 2, everybody is like, that's the one you got to play, and Mikami didn't even make that. Yeah, he kind of has an
playing that
to
first
one
on
2 games.
Couldn't get too far.
It's not for me. Yeah, I'm the same way, but I am gonna give it an honest try. It's kind of interesting though with RE 1.5. I mean, essentially, I have RE 1.5 to thank for my channel, because when all of this started, I had a channel for years and years and years, but when RE2 remake got announced, everybody was looking for RE 1.5 content, and at the time there was just a hurricane in South Florida that knocked out my internet where I lived, and I didn't have to go to work, and I had electricity. So I was like, I mean, what am I going to do? I have this YouTube channel. So I decided to play through the Resident Evil games and just capture my footage. And I started like writing out scripts of, like reviews and stuff. And I made a video on 1.5, and then my video on 1.5 was like available when people were discussing the 1.5 content that would be in 2 remake, and just boom, my channel just blew up. It was insane.
Wait, was that Hurricane Matthew?
I believe.
Or was it after that?
No. I think it was Hurricane Matthew.
Yeah, I was here for that one too.
Yeah, I can't remember for the life of me, but we lived close to a hospital, so we were on one of the power grids that came back first. So
nice.
We had like AC and stuff. We were living large, and I was just like, I mean, I have like, I don't know, a week play through all the Resident Evil games,
That's the thing about living in Florida in general. On a side note, if you're ever going down here, you want to move here, you got to put up with like our holiday season, which is from the tail end of winter or into spring all the way through summer into early winter is hurricane season. So you got like a 6 to 8 month window where you might get fucked.
Yeah,
but
it's pretty awful. And then also you get like 2 weeks worth of cold weather throughout the entire year, which is really fun.
Yeah.
See, we've got the opposite. Like here in Scotland, you get 2 weeks of warm weather throughout the year. The rest of the time, you're kind of fucked.
Yeah.
I was going to say as well about the early Resident Evil games, the replay value or the replayability is done in different ways. With the first game, it's done through this kind of fairly subtle choice system that's woven into the storyline, where if you go in certain directions or go to certain areas first, you'll meet characters at different places, and ultimately it can result in a very different gaming experience. And you can end up, some characters might die, some might make it to the end. And I was pointing this out on my playthrough just when I did Resident Evil 1 the other day. Just subtle things like after you fought the giant snake for the second time, and like you go down a hole in the floor, Barry will come in and lower you down and then drop the rope. And it's like, oh shit, like we've been left behind by this guy. But if you hang around for a couple of minutes, he'll come back with a rope and like bring you out. But there's no indication that you should do that or that's a thing you can do, because you're free to just press on with the game. But all of that influences how the story plays out. And I think it's a nice, like, subtle little system that's like woven into the very fabric of your gameplay. It's not always obvious you're making a choice, but you are. Whereas with the second one, the replay value was in the second scenario, where you got to replay the whole events of the game from the other character's point of view. And then you could flip it and so go like, play like as Leon first and then Claire second, or Claire first and then Leon second. So essentially you got 4 playthroughs of the game with the 2 characters, which is quite an interesting system. And I've never quite decided which I like more, but they're both pretty innovative little ideas.
I gotta feel like with the first game, especially because you have those situations that happen that are very subtle when you think about it, because when you play through it, you're not really thinking twice about it. So like with the situation with Barry, or how there's other times where you can encounter Rebecca in different instances, and that might even end up getting her killed. But that situation with Barry, where you just wait for, if you hang around long enough, he'll come back. Felt like that's the developers taking something, because at the time there wasn't a lot of narrative driven games like in their early night, especially on the PlayStation. And I think that was someone seeing the crude development tools and trying to think like, how could I incorporate some more narrative structure into this? Give it something more of a real engaging experience. It's something that kind of reminds me of I just got that first-person shooter documentary, and they covered the guy who made the first Aliens total conversion mod for Doom. And the whole thing on his first level was there's nothing going on. And the guy said, well, that's because I want to build up, this experience. I want to build up the tension and let the player feel, as being a part of the story. And no one had ever experienced that before. That's something that I kind of get the impression of with like stuff like that in Resident Evil 1 and especially 2.
Well, I feel Resident Evil 1 was pretty closely mirroring Alone in the Dark with just about everything that happened in the game. And I feel like Alone in the Dark was essentially a point-and-click adventure game that you could control the character directly. And then I think that's why Resident Evil 1 has such a tendency to do things that it never tells you that you could even do. I think that there's a little bit of that adventure, the point-and-click adventure DNA in there. And I think it also speaks to, again, going right back to like word of mouth and stuff. I remember talking to kids like at my middle school and then being like, did you know if you wait around, Barry will actually come back? Like that cool, like like video game secret thing where, hey, did you hear about that cheat code in Mortal Kombat or whatever? Like, man, I miss that about video games, when you could just be like, because there's an element of not being able to prove it too, because then I'd have to go out and rent Resident Evil 1 again to see if Barry comes back.
Dude, that's how I found out about what the Konami code was. The first Resident Evil game I'd actually ever gotten and beaten was Resident Evil 2 Platinum on PC. And I come home one day and my brother's playing it and he's like, hey, check this out. I'm like, what? He opens up the menu and all the guns have unlimited ammo. Like, how the fuck did you do that? It's like, I'm not telling you, because he's my older asshole brother. But I love him, by the way. He's cool. But then I go to school the next day and I talk to the kids who played it. Like, yeah, it's the Konami code. I'm like, what's that? It's up, up, down, down, left, right. But in the game, it's supposed to be start, select on the controller. But on the PC, it's up, up, down, down, left, right, X. And that's like a code that I think works in, I think it's like Street Fighter or something. It gives you a special cheat or something like that. But it gives you infinity ammo in Resident Evil 2. And I only found out about that going to school. Like, hey, what's this thing? Anyone hear about that shit? And I miss that. Finding all Easter eggs from people instead of online.
A friend of mine had the Game Shark.
Oh, man.
You shoved that thing into the back of your PlayStation, and like we had so much fun dicking around with Resident Evil 2 because you could play as like Tofu and give him like unlimited ammo for the rocket launcher or whatever. And wow, it did some weird things to the gameplay. Like he would drop through the floor and stuff because there wasn't a character model for the guns on him. It was weird.
I had no idea that there was Fourth Survivor. There was a hunk mode and Fourth Survivor in Resident Evil 2. Because when I looked at magazines, I would look at magazines as a kid. I never read them because I fucking sucked at reading when I was a kid. So I'd see pictures of it, but I didn't get any context behind the pictures. And I saw a picture. I'd only just barely play Resident Evil 2, so I knew I was looking at Resident Evil 2, and I saw pictures of Tofu, and I didn't know what the thing was saying, so I legit thought that, oh no, there's a zombified bathtub in this game. That sounds So I'm like, I'm playing the game and I'm seeing the screenshot where Tofu was at, and I think it was somewhere someone played it in like the RPD, and I was dreading. I was anticipating hearing like a clink, clink, clink. And I played through. I'm like, I guess it's not there. And I find out years later, it's like, no, you beat the game ridiculously amount of times. You get that playthrough.
Yeah, because like I love the fact that he was just created as a hitbox tester for Capcom. Like he wasn't supposed to be a character, and then they just thought, fuck it, like he looks funny, let's just put him in as like
he's in the code
as a character. Why not? Yeah, It's interesting because even with Resident Evil 2, like they started to go more down the action roads versus exploration and problem solving. And then you saw a lot more of that in Resident Evil 3, where it's like very action focused and it's very immediate. And that game was a weird one.
Balanced though, you know?
It still had, yeah, it still had some of the original Resident Evil DNA for sure. I just feel like without the Nemesis, like that game would have been kind of lost. Like it wouldn't have had a strong identity, but that character kind of saved it. Just the fact that he's so relentless, and it seemed that he appeared at random times. Obviously, I know in retrospect it wasn't, like it was still kind of pre-scripted, but there was times when you could just walk into a room or an area and he was just fucking standing there waiting to like mess you up.
Yeah.
It was
Without
great. It was
the music
a
even
neat mechanic.
you in. Yeah, without that, because sometimes you get the music that I think it's called, like, there's a title for it, but when you hear that kind of impending low note song that's playing, like you know he's around the corner.
You can hear like a bunch of string instruments going.
Yeah. But then there's points of the game where that song's not even playing. You just open the next door and all of a sudden, boom, the Nemesis theme song's up. Like, where the fuck is he?
And then it can open doors as well, like because like you're so used to enemies where I can walk into the next room and they can't follow me. It's all fine. But then you hear the clank of a door opening, and it's like, what the fuck? And then there he is. He's here to mess with you again.
Sensory overload, because you go in there and then you hear a door open and shut. It's the first time you hear something like that in the middle of gameplay. It's not a cutscene, and then the music cranks on. And I remember that first experience because I'd never been through something like that, and I stopped dead in my tracks. Like, what's going on? And then he just comes in like a goddamn fucking freight train, just charging at me with the rocket launcher. And I couldn't even hit the pause button. I'm just like, just in shock. Like, what the fuck was this? This has never happened before. And I remember stopping the game and thinking, is this how it's going to be? This is at the RPD. I'm like, this is going to be the rest of the game.
Pretty much.
I need a chill. I took the night off. I'm like, I can't play this. Is way more than I anticipated.
I think Nemesis works best when you're playing it for the first time. As like a guy who wants to like play Resident Evil now, just like to sit down and play Resident Evil 3. Man, I hate Nemesis now. I can't stand it because it's like it introduces this kind of not random, but random enough element where it's like, okay, I have just enough amount of ammo or healing items or whatever. I'm set. And then Nemesis just like, oh, I forgot I had the wires on me, so he's going to spawn in this hallway. And it's just a dice roll whether or not I take a hit. And for me, it just becomes purely like statistical. And then it's like, I know running past him, I'm either going to have to waste ammo or waste healing items at some point. And I'm only have enough to deal with whatever's in front of me until I get to the next item box. I don't know. It ruins it for me. To a degree, it's more annoying than it is innovative to me now as an old man. But at the time when I had first rented Resident Evil 3, it was incredible just having a monster that could follow you from room to room. That was just it. It was just like that was the chief pinnacle of what like Resident Evil could evolve to in my mind, was monsters following you between rooms.
I'll say it right now. Like to this day, I can't play the original. I can't fight Nemesis. I'll fight him when I want to. If I feel like, all right, I really want the gun, but
there's times when he just shows up randomly and it's like you can kind of run past him, but there's other times when you have to make a conscious choice to fight him, and one of them is outside the RPD. And fuck me, that is a tough battle because you don't have many weapons at that point in the game, and he hits really hard. He is tougher than Tyrant from the first game. That was like the final boss, and this is a guy you're fighting in the first 15-20 minutes of the game. Like,
with like a shotgun and like 7 shells, maybe, if you're lucky at that point.
Yeah, like that is a tough intro to this guy. And yeah, it's a difficult decision to make. But the thing that always put me off about Resident Evil 3, I think, was it never felt like it had a focal point. You know, like with the first 2 games, like it was the Spencer Mansion or you had the police station. With this, it was just like a kind of mishmash of different streets that you walk down, and a lot of them were just like really long alleyways that didn't really lead to anything interesting. And the whole feeling was like, I feel like the game's, missing a little bit of potential here. Like exploring Raccoon City during the zombie outbreak should be awesome, but it kind of feels like it's just a bit bland. I don't know, like. It was a hard one to explain, but there was just no focal point to the game, I think.
I saw it differently. To me, it just, I guess it hit me at this. For me, it's probably a culmination of when I played it and like the place I was at and like, you know, the time and place. Because at the time I got the game, I was living down in São Paulo in Brazil, which is like one of the largest cities in the world. Essentially, it's like Manhattan in the jungle. And so when seeing those settings, those environments, those alleyways, it really resonated with me because I could look at my window on my computer as I'm playing. I just look at my window and I can see, oh, there's that alleyway with the trash that's all on fire, or there's the alleyway with you know, where you got to go and get there's the fire hose, the wrench, and it leads out to where that bus is. It just, for me, every alleyway or every spot in the city when you go through it had its own character to it, because every place, even though you don't really do much outside of running through a lot of them, it definitely looked visually appealing, at least to me, because every alleyway, every street had its own thing going on. And that's what made it kind of special. That's why I really love the third game. The third game is my favorite one out of the entire series.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's pretty much, I mean, we can get into it later, but the third remake, the disappointment that it was, is one of the major catalysts as to why I did Carrier. But yeah, I always loved the third one. It felt the most like Aliens to me, because you play as Jill, who could also just be a stand-in for Ripley. You meet up with the mercenaries, and you know they're just like the Marines, and it all ends with a countdown, and you escape from the city before it explodes.
I think the Resident Evil 3 kind of exposed, or should I say, it pushed the limits of what you could realistically do with third-person pre-rendered backgrounds in terms of like having fast-paced, because what they obviously wanted was fast-paced, action-packed gameplay. You're on a time limit. You got to get out of the city before the place hall goes to hell and blows up, and then the nuke drops on it. You know, go, 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 quick, quick, quick. And that's not necessarily compatible with the Resident Evil presentation style at the time. You know, it was much more suited to like mooching around like some creaky old mansion out in the woods or whatever, because it was slow paced. And you could sort of feel it at times where the game engine was struggling to like keep up with what it needed to do. I always remember the bit where Nemesis gets hit with the railgun, and like you could see that frame rate dropping. It's down to like sub 10 frames per second. Like, oh, I think we've maxed out what this engine can do, you know.
But you know, interestingly, I think we can probably explain why you feel sort of like it's like a patchwork kind of thing, because RE3 did begin development as a spin-off title.
Yeah.
And I think it probably makes sense that they had not really focused out the environment quite as to fill out a main numbered entry in the series kind of deal. So I would imagine that they had started development, they had created resources, backgrounds, a storyboard or something like that maybe, and then they threw Jill in there, and they probably messed with the story and events and where and when things trigger. But probably if you had a bunch of pre-renders that took you like a week to render out on a server farm, maybe you didn't alter those and you kind of just used them continually. You know, I don't know up to what point production had gotten before it became Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, but you know, it probably would explain why you sort of get that feeling from a little patchwork, lack of focus kind of deal.
I can tell you that. It was originally supposed to be, Jill wasn't even going to be in it. Like you said, it was supposed to be a spin-off title. And you were supposed to play as one of the mercenaries from the UBCS. You were going to be like, Mikhail was going to have a brother. So you're going to be the dynamic between the two. And it was all about the mercenary team escaping. And then at some point, this all comes down to like the backdoor deals that Capcom was making with PlayStation, and they wanted to transition over to GameCube. So they had to fulfill their contractual obligations. So PlayStation's like, well, hey, you promised us 3 titles. And then Capcom's like, oh, okay, there. That one's the third game. Boom. Yeah. That's as much care and dedication as Capcom had towards
RE3. And like I know that they had to rush it out because the PlayStation 2 was on the horizon at that point. And it's like, okay, we need to get this out while the PS1 is still a viable commercial entity so we can milk it. And so, yeah, like I totally understand, you know, the limitations that were on the dev teams and the time pressure they were under. And essentially, this was like a little humble spin-off title that was suddenly bumped up into a mainline series game. And I think with all of that in mind, they did pretty damn well.
Yeah,
it's just,
sure.
it really, compared to RE2, you can just see how it was stretched a little bit. And so they had to, they even made use of like RE2 assets. You know, part of the police station was there rendered in because like they already had the backgrounds. Why not reuse them?
Yeah.
But they did include some of the best fucking weapons in the game, and that's the STI Eagle, but also the Terminator 2 shotgun.
Yeah. Killer.
Always give it credit for that.
I will give them that. Yeah. What was the game that had the bow gun in it? I think that was RE2.
Code Veronica.
Yeah, RE2. Code Veronica and RE2.
Also Code Veronica.
Yeah,
which
I fucking hate that gun.
Really?
Maybe it's just because it sounds so lame. Like there's no gunshot to it. But like, just like firing 3 fairly weak bolts that just go,
that's what turned me off from
it's like the gun's just kind of apologizing for itself. Like you fire it and it's like
Yeah, as a teenager, when you pull the trigger, you want to hear some sort of a localized explosion and not an arrow silently fly through the air.
That took me forever to get around to playing Claire's campaign, because when you're playing as Leon, the first thing you get, like within 5 minutes, you get a shotgun. Bam! If you go back and get it from the corpse. Yeah. But then if you do the same thing as Claire, I got a fucking bow gun. Like, the hell?
Yeah, when I replay that now, I'm just like, nah, I'm fine. I'll stick with my pistol for now.
Yeah, but she does get the grenade launcher, so it is.
Yeah, I mean, later down the line, sure, when I keep playing,
The other one that always stuck out for me was Code Veronica. Like, because in retrospect, it feels like this weird outlier in the series. Technology had obviously gotten to the point where, okay, we don't need pre-rendered backgrounds anymore, but we've got the kind of like semi-fixed cameras. Like, okay, it can like pan around and stuff, but it's generally in a fixed location and it just tracks the player as they go. But man, the animation is so fucking weird. Like, I always remember the characters, like they just kind of glide over everything. Like their running style is so like robotic and weird. And yeah, the whole setup for it is just another Resident Evil, but this time it's on a weird island place. Yeah, it's a strange title in the series that I feel like if they remade it, they would have to do some serious magic on that one. Because
honestly, I feel like Code Veronica would probably lend itself much better to being remade than something like RE2.
Yeah,
because it already sort of incorporated a camera that moved, at least. You know what I mean? Steve Burnside walks in.
God, I hate that fucking character.
Oh, that Canadian accent when I was a kid is amazing.
So
I feel like it's one of the more underrated games in the series. I don't know why I like it so much, but it feels like to me that next level that RE was probably heading towards, because you have the evolution of a fixed camera is one that sort of follows you on a fixed rail, maybe. So when you're going down that like bridge section and it's following you, my brain finally put it together. It's like, oh, the camera's moving, but it still felt like a Resident Evil camera angle because you can't control it,
I think part of the problem for me is like because the backgrounds weren't pre-rendered anymore, they had to move, and so there was a loss of detail there. Like a lot of that beautiful artwork that you used to get was gone, and also the environments just all felt like really bland. There was a lot of like boring warehouses and stuff that you were walking through, and there was just like it never felt like an interesting place that I wanted to explore. Everything just felt too kind of clean and polished and just boring, I suppose. Compared to like other Resident Evil environments where it's like, oh, I'm fascinated to just see more of this place.
And I think that might just come down to like developers behind it getting used to the technology on the PS2. So they were probably focusing more on like, all right, well, we can create this 3D navigatable background, this environment. We'll put these assets in there. So now you have actual boxes, you have crates, you have computers that, are actually modeled, but they didn't really have the wherewithal to know how far they could use the processor, the system, the software, whatever it was that they made. So that one, to me, Code Veronica feels like a really kind of elaborate tech demo on transitioning the Resident Evil franchise and formula into the world of 3D rendered environments.
I think as well, like because generally the enemies up until this point had been like corporations and spies and military guys and whatever, and like suddenly you've got this weird aristocratic nut job who's like goes around all the time dressed in like full like regalia, but he also cross dresses as his sister. It's just so oh man, it just didn't feel like a Resident Evil game.
I don't know. That felt really great to me. I loved it.
Yeah. So I really liked we need more horror elements in there. Anyone ever seen Psycho? Cool, let's put that in there.
Yeah.
They even have the mansion up on top of the hill, like in the hotel. Yeah.
Well, I think it was that move from Midwestern America, like very much grounded in reality kind of horror, to gothic horror, where you've got
also it didn't feel like they did a lot of effort on the production side, because to me, it still bothers me when I'm playing it. Half the sound effects still sound like they're from Resident Evil 2. The gunshots, the zombie, everything sounds like it's been recycled. It's like,
I get that.
Even Resident Evil 3, they went out and actually did more sound effects, like the guns sound different. Even some of the infected sound different. They have their own unique sound to them. The zombies in 3 do not sound like the zombies in 2.
Right.
But then with Code Veronica, it just like it felt like not necessarily a step backward, but like a sidestep. Like it doesn't feel like we're doing too much forward momentum with that one.
Yeah, it honestly just feels like they started to take a few steps down a path that maybe they decided not to ultimately. Like
I would imagine it has to do with at the time Capcom was making arcade games, essentially like arcade ports for the Dreamcast, and their understanding of Dreamcast architecture basically came from that. There wasn't a lot of like really detailed stuff coming out of Capcom graphically for that console. So I would probably assume that when they started the Code Veronica project, they had their Dreamcast team on it. And maybe their Dreamcast team and their Resident Evil team, there wasn't a lot of overlap between the two, maybe. Because there is a lot in Code Veronica that feels very different and feels... it just feels like someone else had handled it. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I get where you're coming from with that. For me, it felt, because we weren't going to be able to keep the backgrounds 2D forever. Even I, at the time, who loved it, still do. I prefer pre-rendered backgrounds if they're available. That's what I want for sure. But even as a teenager loving them, I was like, man, this cannot last as games continue to become more and more 3D. And I feel like Code Veronica was them going like, all right, we'll move in that direction. And then people are like, still, they weren't feeling it. But at the time, they were releasing a Resident Evil game like every half a year, something like that.
Yeah.
So they might have just saturated the market and had, they waited 2 years in between every Resident Evil game. We might be playing classic survival horror today,
It's also interesting that you mentioned that like Capcom was doing arcade games at the time, because I remember a lot of the heavy promotion for Code Veronica back in the day was the fact that it's 3D. We can do first person. So there was the first person mode you can do for the battle, but I don't know. Did you guys ever go into the websites back in the day they would make for the games to promote them? Mm-hmm. There was a flash game you could play in Code Veronica that was just a shooting gallery. No sound effects, no nothing. You got your mouse in the space bar, and you see zombie targets pop up in like some warehouse section from the game.
I remember they had one of those for the remake of Dawn of the Dead on the website. They had a little shooting game.
I remember that. You're in the garage with the chain link fence. Yeah. That shit was intense.
Hell yeah, dude.
I remember as well, like this was the game that brought back Wesker as an antagonist, because like he was... It's so funny to compare the Wesker from that game to the one from like Resident Evil 1, where he was just this kind of goofy, wannabe corporate like espionage guy.
Like he would be your asshole boss from police force in the Midwest. He felt like a regular guy that just happened to be your boss.
Now they gave him this sort of quasi British accent, and suddenly he's got all these superpowers, and like it's just so it's such a weird switch in character.
I remember that. Like, why does he have the accent? Like, as a kid, like, why does he have the accent? First of all, why is he back? And why is he British? And obviously, even as a kid, I could tell you got Capcom, you're trying too hard to make him evil with a British accent. That's even my 12-year-old ass can be like, that's a bit much, man.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't notice it when I first played it. All that stuff was just like I have a tendency to just turn my brain off when I want to like immerse myself in something. So when I watch a movie and everybody's like, "Yeah, you know, I saw that twist coming," it's like I didn't because I wasn't thinking about it at all. So I was playing Code Veronica and I was like, my primitive ape brain was just being activated by someone going Super Saiyan and like punching someone in the stomach and sending them flying across the room.
I mean, like the simple part of me was like, "Hey, I like Wesker. It's cool to have him back."
Yeah.
The other part of me was like, "Why is he alive?"
Mhm.
But then I don't know if you guys remember this, but like when Code Veronica came out on the PlayStation, they released like a DVD that came with it called Wesker's Report.
Yes.
Yep.
And that kind of tried to fill in the gaps. And it was essentially like, this is the reason why Wesker's still alive. He injected himself with the T virus because he knew he was going to get attacked. Okay, sure, I guess.
So funny thing about the Wesker's Report, I first got Code. I didn't. So like I said, I grew up not having a PlayStation, even a PS2. I played Code Veronica by reading the S.D. Perry novels. That's how I played all the games. I read the books first because I didn't have the consoles.
Really?
So yeah. So that's why when I played Resident Evil 1, I never had an issue finding the medals because in the book, I read the book first and Wesker opens the book and finds the medal.
Huh.
So when playing with Code Veronica, my uncle, who knows at the time knew I was a huge Resident Evil fan, he bought me Code Veronica X on PS2. He's like, "Hey, it's Resident Evil. Here you go. You love it, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't have a PlayStation." So it said it was DVD-ROM, so I tried putting it in my DVD player. It didn't work. So it wasn't until like a couple years later that I saw the Wesker's Report on an Angel Fire website on like super pixelated, like film with a potato kind of quality.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what that was because I didn't read the back of the box.
It was a fun little thing that came with the game, and it actually, you know, it helped to set up this next chapter of the Resident Evil franchise because clearly they wanted Wesker back as a big antagonist because he was cool, and you know, it wasn't very convenient that he got killed in the first game. So like, okay, fine, you know, he's super powered now because he's got the T virus in him and he's got glowing red eyes because that's cool. That explains why he wears sunglasses all the time, as we all do. But yeah, you know, aside from him, yeah, I don't have particularly strong positive memories of Code Veronica. It was just like a game that came out and like now just seems like this weird anomaly in the Resident Evil series. And you know, it was right about the time as well that we got the Resident Evil remake and Resident Evil 0. Again, like that was like the last stand of the pre-rendered backgrounds where the GameCube came out. They had obviously the ability to make much better graphics, much more detailed. And it's like they said, well, let's just redo 1. Let's just redo Resident Evil 1 and like we can make all of our development dreams come true. And I still stand by this today. Like that's probably my favorite version of Resident Evil is Resident Evil 1 remake. It's so fucking fun to play.
It's a quintessential
gorgeous.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, looking at it now,
some of the plot holes in there, like, okay, this is a mansion that's been occupied by researchers and they've been under a quarantine from a ravenous virus. Why does it still look like it's dusty and everything's untouched?
Yeah.
Why do they only have one bathroom throughout the entire facility?
Why did they have candles that are lit in a bunch of different rooms? Like who keeps these things going? They've been burning for like a month now. Yeah, stuff like that, but like it just expands everything. Like the mansion is so much bigger now, like the grounds around it are bigger. You got you know, bosses like Lisa Trevor who are genuinely like terrifying when you have to fight them because you can't kill them.
One thing that I love that they did the most too was how they made the characters look a bit more realistic instead of these like really, really good looking, almost anime looking people. Chris he looks like your regular. He looks like he's got like a bad haircut. Even when you go to his selection screen, when you see his STARS officer badge and there's a penny wedge inside of it, it's like, you know, I got a bunch of loose change in my pockets too. This guy's more of an everyman to me than anyone else before.
Well, that actually makes sense because RE1 Remake is the first game that I'm aware of where they started modeling real people in order to like actual face modeling them in order to have the characters in game look like a model or someone they feel like fits the character.
Yeah. But I think, yeah, generally it felt like, okay, I'm playing Resident Evil, but it's a bit more grown up now.
Oh, for sure.
And
it also felt way more violent too. Like the deaths in that game, like that was insane. And
honestly,
I love how
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I love the promotional content. Like the first trailer they put out for that thing, I remember watching it on like a small little compressed video screen, and they had the balls to end that trailer with Chris getting his head just sliced off by a hunter. Like,
that's what I was going to talk about is
yeah.
that teaser right there, because I
Yeah.
used to with dial-up internet and not constant internet access. Like I would have to go into my dad's office, right? Ask him for permission to use his computer. I could dial into the internet, go to BioFlames or something. But I would go to Capcom's website for the RE1 remake, and they had a teaser on there, a little QuickTime encoded teaser. And like you said, it was literally maybe 40 by 40 pixels. Like it was insanely low quality. But I would watch that teaser because it was just these slow kind of like fade ins of areas of the mansion and down in the lab. And it was just like heaven to me because I loved Resident Evil 1 so much. And I was seeing it from what my eyes, that was like reality that I was looking at. Is incredible. I thought the GameCube was the most powerful console of its day just because of RE1 remake. You know, I didn't understand the pre-rendered stuff is less taxing or whatever. So I was like, I mean, these are like real graphics, guys.
They still are today.
They were animated. Yeah, they were animated for the first time. And like, you know, it was kind of just an FMV sequence running on a loop, but it was very clever. It looked great at the time. And, you know, if you play it, like the version I played was on the PS4 and it was upscaled. Like they'd optimized it and stuff. And it looks gorgeous. The backgrounds are properly like detailed. The character models look great. Like it's just a gorgeous game to play.
Yeah.
And the same principle carried over to Resident Evil 0. Like graphically, it looks fantastic. Bit of a weird game when I play it now because it's like the whole partner zapping system thing. I never really loved that. I don't know about you guys. I always feel like Resident Evil should be a solo experience. I hate the idea of partners that you can jump to or that can be there to watch your back. It takes
for
a lot
short
of
periods of time just to like give that experience. Like you have this other character in the storyline, but then you get separated, you know, like how they did with Carlos and Jill, but not integral to the entire game. Because like you said, it's about that isolated experience, about being on your own, being confined, and being, you know, you got to rely on just yourself. And yeah, 0 is definitely, I rank 0 just below Code Veronica in terms of like weird entries into this series.
Yeah, the whole you can only drop items. You can't use the item boxes anymore. Like as a Resident Evil player, that was such a weird switch in my head.
Okay, great. The room's just going to be the item box then.
Yeah. Well, see, you know what? Honestly, I feel like I'm a broken record here. I'm the RE underdog guy apparently, but yeah, RE0, I love it. I really do.
Really?
But to be fair, I 100% understand what people don't like about it. Like the inventory system. It is, I can admit, not ideal gameplay wise to stop every so often and have this weird item trading, you know, carnival with your partner nonstop until you can like, it's like a sliding block puzzle and you finally clear enough stuff to where you have an empty inventory space. I get that 100%. And you're right to not like it. But for some reason I do. I really enjoy it. And I really like being able to drop items a lot. And then the fact that the map tracks where those items are. So like if I come across a key and I don't have room for it, I'll maybe pick up the key and then drop it again so that I have it on my map and I know to come back and get it or something like that. There was a lot in there that I think worked really well. The same thing with the partner mechanic. You're 100% right. Nobody likes an escort mission, especially when the AI is, you know, every once in a while in RE0, Rebecca will do something stupid, get grabbed by a zombie she shouldn't have. What I would do is I would control each character individually. And if there's like a leech zombie or something dangerous that I needed to run around, I would just make one character wait, run through with the, you know, whoever, and then grab the other character and run them through individually. And I would do this for rooms and rooms at a time, which is not a fun way to play a video game. So you're right for not liking it, but for some reason it gets to me. Like I enjoy it. So I think I might have an issue or something.
I mean, It's not the gameplay mechanics. For a lot of the reasons why I'll have like a low opinion on a game is its story. Because for me, I'm not a big fan of multiplayer games. I think the last real multiplayer game I gave a shit about was like Counter-Strike and Left 4 Dead. Because I play games for that experience, you know, so to get out of my everyday to day going on and my activities. I want to sit down, be taken outside of my own comfort zone, my own world. And for Resident Evil 0, I respect the idea of a prequel following a Bravo team before Resident Evil 1 because they're the ones that go in first. Just the whole narrative just doesn't fit to me. Like it takes place the night before. If this is a special trained, you know, high tactical police group, why does it take them over almost 24 hours to locate their helicopter when they were flying around just outside the city space?
I think that's what. Yeah, I was going to say like that's what the game was sold on to me. Like I was always interested, like, well, whatever became of these Bravo team guys, like this group that went in before you. Obviously, you find they're dead or they're dying in the mansion. Like, how did they end up there? What did they experience along the way? And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to get those questions answered? And then you play Resident Evil 0 thinking that's what you're going to get. And ultimately, it's nothing like that. It's just a completely separate adventure that occasionally intersects with that Resident Evil timeline. And it just felt like a bit of a missed opportunity, I guess, story-wise.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shit story. There's no getting around it. There's a leech guys and then the researcher was shot and the leech got inside of him and that's why he's been it's so stupid. I'm usually one who like I will be the guy who will stand in defense of Resident Evil stories when everyone says they're bad, but with RE0 I gotta put my hands up, like you guys can have that one.
I mean, because I respect the core concept of it. Like, there's a researcher who was snuffed and they, you know, Wesker and Birkin took his hard work and kind of took the credit. So we never heard about the guy. Now this isn't getting his comeuppance. That's great. That's a great launching point. Why does he got to look like a reject from Final Fantasy? Why is he standing in a row barefoot on top of a mountain singing? It's just
opera singing.
Yeah, that was out of step.
You know, the legacy you've already laid with Resident Evil. Resident Evil is still relatively at that point grounded in a sense, and it's still corporate, you know, cloak and dagger kind of conspiracy theories.
Yes.
With a viral outbreak. And then I think 0 was following up on what Code Veronica did, which was that's when Code Veronica is when we really start to see that deviation from what they had kind of created at that time. They started going towards senseless action.
Yeah.
I think, especially once you get like aristocracy and like, you know, crazy lore going back decades and, you know, all this stuff. Like you say, like characters that look like rejects from Final Fantasy. It's like you're really stepping away from what made Resident Evil compelling and interesting in the first place, because now you're getting into the realms of fantasy rather than science fiction thriller, you know.
Yeah.
And it's funny as well because when I look back now, that was really the last of the old Resident Evil games, RE0.
It was.
Ultimately, what we got then was Resident Evil 4, which to this day, man, I've still got mixed feelings about. And like I tried to articulate that in my review back in the day. It's like I really respect what that game did in moving the series forward action wise and making that moment to moment gameplay really interesting and much more, you know, heart in your mouth kind of thing. The problem is that it just became an over the shoulder shooter ultimately, and it started the series down that path and it never really recovered from it. I don't know how you guys ever felt about it, but
I mean, I'll get into my opinion initially, but first of all, I gotta say my current opinion on it now has not changed but evolved after watching a lot of your reviews, Jared, because you kind of put a different perspective on how the game is. And I see it now more as an enjoyable gameplay experience and not so much as the Resident Evil experience I was hoping for.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Since I'll let you go ahead and give your 2 cents on it since you got a lot on that.
I mean, yeah, that's essentially it. I think Resident Evil 4 is a really fun video game. It's just a really bad Resident Evil game. You know, if we're gonna, I mean, Final Fantasy 13 is, there's elements of it that's just like objectively you probably shouldn't design a game that way. But if you judge it against the Final Fantasies that came before it, it's just like, okay, well, this is kind of a bad Final Fantasy game. They're not doing any of the stuff that the series is known to do. I think RE4 is the same idea. It's amazingly fun. It's for the time pretty well put together, a pretty tight action game. I enjoy the hell out of it. But at the same time, I think it came around at a period when video gaming was like at its peak, because you had the PS2 generation. The PS2 was like the best selling piece of like hardware in tech period. It was just huge. So video games were rivaling cinema at the time. And you had a bunch of kids who had GameCubes, and Capcom put so much money into the advertising for RE4. It became this kind of cult hit everybody talked about. And it's a really fun action game, but I think that's a lot of people's first Resident Evil game. And I think that's probably why the series as we know it is now essentially RE4 with, a few tweaks made here or there.
I think, because you were so used to a game series where you had to do something as simple as walking up a flight of stairs. You had to press X in order to do it. Like, very restrictive in terms of your movement. To suddenly have an over-the-shoulder...
Resident Evil 3 actually did.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got free movement there. Yeah,
and then they did after. Yeah,
you had the quick turn move as well. Like that. Yeah. You were a badass if you could do that.
No, but interestingly, RE4 also, that's another thing. People who love RE4 love to shit on tank controls, and it's interesting that people don't understand. RE4 is a game that uses tank controls, though.
Yeah,
it's such a weird one as well, because I don't know about you guys, I never had an issue with tank controls ever.
No. Yeah.
Like I literally picked up the game within about 20 seconds. I understood exactly how it worked and how the tank controls operated, and I just got it. I never found.
I remember a friend of mine who had gotten a GameCube, my brother's friend, when I was still in middle school, and I asked him, "Oh, you got a GameCube? Did you get the new Resident Evil games?" Like, yeah, I got it. That game's really hard to play. Like, what do you mean? It's like the controls are just ridiculous, and I thought that, they must have changed the controls around because it's a new game, new console. Yeah. It's like, no, it's just a guy who can't play tank controls.
Yeah.
I never understood the whole anti-tank control thing, because it's like you just pick up the game and you understand how it's controlled, and it responds exactly to your inputs, which I think is how you should grade, controls in a video game. But when people, if they would just realize that it's not your perspective, you're not moving forward as far as you're concerned, you're moving forward as far as your character is concerned. When you hit up, they move in the direction that they're facing. I feel like that just breaks the barrier right there. Let your mind understand that your character is moving and not you, and you should be okay. But when I had the controllers in my hand, like as a kid, I was playing, and I had never played a game with tank controls before. And you pick them up and you go, oh, I get this. And then you keep playing. Like, I don't understand the issue here.
I find that's even more engaging to the experience, because when I play it, like I said, I like to be given an experience. And when I play the games every single time, even if it's one that I've already played a dozen times, like 3, I like to pretend that I'm in the perspective of the character I'm playing. If I'm playing as Jill, if I'm playing as Leon, if I'm playing as Chris, even if I'm coming up on like a scare that's coming up that I know it, I like to pretend that I'm playing through that for the first time, because it's fun, it's engaging, it's immersive. And at the same time, it's also my character is moving this direction. I know how to properly respond to that. Also, I might have had the benefit of growing up playing it on the PC, so I have the arrow keys instead of the D-pad with my thumb.
It translates surprisingly well to using the arrow keys, because I've had to on a few different PC builds of RE. And it's, surprisingly easy to use with your right hand on the arrow keys and your left hand on like ZXCV or something.
ZXCV, man, all the way.
Yeah,
those
are
these guys right here. I grew up on that, man. Just ready to go. It's like settling in, like riding a bike. I just, bam.
Oh yeah.
Like,
I think the other thing that always jumped out at me about 4 was it was, I guess, the first time that you weren't fighting zombies, you were fighting the Ganados. And I don't know how you guys felt about it. I didn't like the fact that my enemies now essentially were just humans that were dumb. Because there was something like fundamentally, I don't know if it's just like this human psychology aspect of it, but like the idea of fighting zombies, they were once humans, but they are now like devoid of their humanity, devoid of their thinking abilities, and they are just killing machines, just shambling towards you. The only thing that's going to stop them is a lot of lead put into them. Whereas the Ganados, it's like, okay, they've got some of the resilience of zombies, but they've still got their human intellect. They still use weapons. And it's like, I just feel like I'm fighting people here. It doesn't have the same level of fear because they're not as viscerally terrifying as zombies
It feels
are.
like the other facet of the zombie mythos, the zombie folklore, which is the mind-controlled zombie, which I'm not a big fan of. Because like you said, I like it when they're absolutely devoid of any humanity, because that's even terrifying. Like, you know, especially when they use, like, if they actually have people's genuine voices recorded as a zombie instead of some manipulated monster sound effect, it feels that much more real, that much more grounded. But like, you know, it's like the uncanny valley effect. It's like, that is not a fucking person. That is something that I don't know what they are now, but keep them the hell away from me by any means necessary.
I have a very weird. It's interesting that both of you kind of feel the same way, because this is. I always thought it was a weird thing with me. Zombies have always interested me because they freak me the fuck out, and it's because it's a recognizable human form acting inhumanly. You know what I mean? And devoid of the intellect that lets you know a person is a person, not communicating. You know, the eyes are gone, like they're staring right past you. That, for some reason, that does something to me. It freaks me out, and I enjoy that scenario specifically. But when they start grabbing ladders to climb up and they're holding weapons, it's just it breaks the illusion for me. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I would have rather have it been like, instead of having intelligent enemies, 40 zombies on screen or something, right? Like make it difficult in numbers instead of like having them, you know, suplex me.
Yeah, because you know, games like Days Gone, right? When you fight a horde of zombies, that is great fun. That's a great challenge. It is kind of terrifying because it's just like this tidal wave of creatures coming at you, and individually they can be killed, but like as a collective whole, they are a real threat because there's so many of them, and they don't care about injuries.
That's one thing that I would give credit to. That's the only thing really that I give credit to that movie, World War Z, with Brad Pitt. I mean, the movie was pretty garbage, but the fact that they had opened up different like facet of, especially the fast zombies, but that crowded zombies that I'd never expected before. Because to me, big fast crowd zombies was done well in Dawn of the Dead remake. What they didn't cover was how they act like ants, and they'll just pile on top of each other and just turn into a giant wave of bodies because they just have
that they had that idea for a swarm of zombies and they built a movie around it, basically. Which I'm okay with, you know, I'm fine, but it definitely wasn't World War Z for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
when it comes to them having
when
they have intelligence, and then like I get it's intense when they can coordinate attacks onto you and they can actually ambush you, but I don't like that's requiring intelligence, and I like that these things are just acting on brute force, like
animalistic, you know.
Animalistic. Now they just keep going and going and going.
I think Jared, your assessment of Resident Evil 4 was probably what I would go with as well, in that it's a fun action thriller of a game. Great fun in the moment-to-moment gameplay. It just feels like it's not a very good Resident Evil game. Unfortunately, it set the template for everything that would come afterwards for a long time, and so you got games like Resident Evil 5, which just took all of those elements of RE4 and just dialed them up to 11, and so you are genuinely fighting hordes of zombies.
I was let down by 5. To me, I still in my head, I'm still waiting for that game that they promised in that beta teaser trailer, where it's just Chris by himself in like that shaded alleyway. And all of a sudden it's birds, they take off, and then we see the silhouettes of zombies, but now they're fast. So now it's like, okay, I think Capcom learned their lesson. There's a lot of us that miss the zombies, so they're going to give us zombies back, but they're going to be fast now. That's fine. That's okay. It's cool. Instead, we get whatever the hell they turned it into now.
And it's a shame because I like Shiva as a character.
I
think she is quite cool, and like I think the actress who played her really worked her arse off on that game. Like did a ton of motion capture for it. But the problem is, like, fundamentally, it goes back to that problem that I'd mentioned before, that I don't want a partner with me when I'm doing a Resident Evil game. I don't want someone that I either have to babysit or that can watch my back and make me feel not as isolated as I should be in a game like that.
Sure.
And I think the game wasn't designed with her in mind. As far as I understand it, she was a late addition to the game.
Yeah, the racism controversy had them putting her in.
All that shit.
Yeah, and it's a shame that that's the reason she was put in, because again, I like the character, but it's just she doesn't get a much development throughout the game. And you can tell like she was a late addition to it. And I would much rather have it just been Chris fighting these like very overwhelming odds, because it would really feel like you were up against it as a player. But we didn't get that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, like I've always said that RE5, Africa as a setting for like a biological horror story, genius as far as I'm concerned. It's like for someone who doesn't live there, someone like me, it's a very like strange place. And I'm afraid of things I don't understand. It, like there's lions and shit. That's scary on its face. And then you add the threat of like a biological terror situation. I always thought that was such a good idea. And then you have people who are so quick to be upset by things that they like took this away from me, because we could have had that trailer that we originally saw with Chris sort of like skulking around and things jumping off of the rooftops in the alleyways. That would have been incredible. Or we could have had a game about just Sheva Alomar. I would have been fine with that as well. Just the setting of Africa and the idea of like Resident Evil style gameplay, I'm already sold. Man, it would have been nice if we lived in a timeline where we got the original RE5. And I mean, because I enjoy RE5 enough. I also don't think it's a bad game. And I think we sort of only have ourselves to blame, because we all loved RE4 so much. And Capcom being, a company, they're like, oh, we'll just do that again. And they've been doing that ever since.
What they did, yeah.
It's all, so it's all our, I mean, there's nothing we could say about RE5 being bad. We taught Capcom exactly how to treat us.
Right.
It's funny as well because, like this was 2005 that it came out, and like that was the reaction to it back then. Imagine what it'd be like now.
Oh, Jesus Christ! I mean, that's such an amazing idea to think about, though. It's like you can almost trace like these things getting worse and worse from that sort of starting point. Because I had never heard of like a controversy like that in video games. It was mostly like, Mel Gibson like said the N-word when he was drunk or something.
Yeah,
you always
Hollywood actors.
Yeah, exactly. You never heard of these type of controversies with a game developer from Japan who had never experienced or had been educated on anything that had anything to do with this. So why the hell would you give a shit what they're saying? I don't know.
Like reading the articles too, and like everyone's screaming, "Oh, this is racism," and then they look at it. Well, it's Capcom's based in Japan, and technically Asians are considered a minority too. So how are you trying to spin this? This is like articles and periodicals in the U.S. base that were trying that, and they watched someone called out the ending of that second trailer where Chris's line is I got a job to do and I'm going to see it through. And you're like, oh, this is just the white savior. I'm like, wait, that's Chris.
What the thing is as well, like
savior.
So like their issue obviously is like you've got this like Western character, like this white guy, taking on hordes of like what seems to be like black savages, essentially, like they've been infected by this virus. And that's unacceptable. And yet literally he does the same exact thing, or Leon does the exact same thing in Resident Evil 4, but it's in Spain.
Spanish people,
but that's totally fine.
Yeah, no problem at all. That's why it's so stupid. That's because you can't make a position on this and then stick to it, because then you would hate everything, because everything has some form of different races interacting in some sort of negative way. And you can't remain consistent on that position, because you will hate all media unless it's incredibly racist media that only includes one race and they never interact outside of their race, because that would be incredibly racist if something negative were to happen. So, like, you can't keep that position, so it's really stupid to pick and choose it. Like, okay, RE4 totally fine, mow down Spanish people, they're acting like animals. If you see somebody from a Japanese developer, keep in mind again, where you have black people acting the same way, now it's an issue. That seems incredibly stupid to me.
And then you expect them to try to remedy the situation, and when it leads to awkward outcomes like that scene in RE5 where there's this skinny petite long flowing blonde hair girl who's dressed up like she's going to a club in New York, calling for help. I'm sure you guys recall. It's when you first see like the first infected, how they do it, I guess. And she's so out of place. I'm like, what? Why is this? This is definitely, I know that I've seen that scene. Like, this is definitely in response to the whole criticism they received, but
for sure,
what are they doing here? Like, this doesn't make sense. And that's why some of that game just has those pockets where it's like,
you hate to see creators visibly limited. Like you saw that and you can see it and you can say, this is a limitation that I'm aware of. And it sort of takes you out of things because you want people to be able to create what they think is interesting and creative, unfettered from like, oh no, but people may find that offensive, because they might, and that might be okay that they find it offensive because it may be a really provocative idea and you might want people to be offended by it, but you shouldn't be limited in whether or not you can put that idea out there because whether or not, someone decides, well, this is now my entire life to take this away.
It's an interesting thing as well, like how it affects Japanese developers, because I always assumed that they were not in a bubble, but like they almost didn't give a fuck what like Western critics said about them, because it's like, well, ultimately we're not part of your culture and we don't have to buy into all the like crazy stuff that you guys like obsess over. So we can just do our thing, and if people buy our game, we almost don't care.
No,
but I guess it does affect them.
The aspect they believe that they listen to, that's worldwide, is money. That's what they listen to.
For sure. And I mean, that's all you can expect from a company. I don't expect corporations to act morally,
Yeah.
I don't expect and you shouldn't, because they're not people.
I was taught, Resident Evil taught me not to see corporations as,
there you go.
Yeah, they're all they're all just the umbrella corporation, but with fewer zombies, like ultimately.
And back in the day, that used to be the case. You used to Japanese companies used to just not give a damn what people in the West whether or not they were offended by their video games, because in the end of the day, they were still purchasing them. So they didn't really care. And it's only recently the Japanese companies started keeping an eye on the West. And that kind of sucks too. Because, now they're getting into the shit that we were doing that was negative in video games.
Yeah, Japan, don't take your cues from us, because we're fucking idiots right now. We're going through a phase of insanity. Just bypass us and just like make the games you want to make.
The PS1 era is proof. They're better. You guys are better at this than us. That's just all there is to it. You proved it to me during the PS1 era. I played all those great RPGs and survival horror games. So I'm just going to let you guys cook over here. Don't you worry about what I'm doing. Just keep putting them out. We'll be fine.
Y'all made the backgrounds of Parasite Eve 2. That is hands down. I know Resident Evil 3 really topped it for Capcom's level of development, but Parasite Eve's 2 pre-rendered backgrounds.
Oh, amazing.
My God, those are gorgeous. And all I could think every time I see them is, if I could have a Resident Evil game, one more in Raccoon City, or at least any.
Isn't it? Yeah. Didn't you cover this, Jared, in a mod? Like you did that video of all the different Resident Evil mods, and one of them was just like Parasite Eve 2 backgrounds spliced into a Resident Evil 2 or a Resident Evil game.
Oh, which one is that?
Is that Before the Storm?
No. Before the Storm takes place in Raccoon City. This one, it's not revisited. It's another one. I totally blanked on the name. But
it's like, it's like you're an Umbrella employee that guards a secret entrance to the underground lab in Resident Evil 1, and it's like basically a motel with a bar attached to it or whatever.
No. That's are you a guy that's dressed in like a suit and a vest?
Yeah, kind of.
Like it's you're playing as Trent. Yeah.
It fits the aesthetic perfectly. Like
it
looks great.
Does. Yeah, and they edited it a little bit. They used the nighttime versions at the Dryfield location. Yeah. But it houses a Resident Evil game so perfectly, you wouldn't even believe it. Like it just fluidly turns into an RE game. It's great.
Yeah, that's the one that you're playing as Trent, who's a character from the novels. And the team had actually contacted me to help after I put out the first episode of Carrier. They liked what I was doing with the narrative structure, so they wanted me to kind of jump on the team and help them with the story. And I was like, yeah, sure. But unfortunately, it ended up being a bit too much. Because all right, now I got to do this. I've also got to focus on my own story. But that one, when I first saw, like, is that Parasite Eve 2 background? How'd you guys do that?
No, it was really good. And the edits they made to them, it's like, it was pretty good. I mean, I liked it a lot. I would love to see more mods where they take pre-rendered backgrounds from other games and put.
I don't even know how they do it. Like, what do they make a full 3D environment, and then they just go around taking screenshots? Is that essentially what it boils down to? Because it still blows my mind.
Well, I mean, back in the day, yeah, that's what they would do. They would build a 3D environment and then screenshot it essentially and render that down into whatever native resolution the PS1 accepted.
That always blows my mind, because that to me says that there's so much attention. Someone is definitely paying attention when they're building out all the design and the text that's on everything.
Oh, of course,
which
yeah.
would make me wonder what was going through their minds when you look in Resident Evil 3, especially through the seamless mods. You see a lot of the signs, that you see the little text is legible, and half that shit makes no sense.
Oh yeah, just English. Yeah, that's really common here. Still to this day here in Tokyo, you'll see things that
as far as I understand it, the HD mods use an AI to extrapolate the backgrounds. Like it doesn't upscale what was existing or anything. It's just it does. It kind of guesses.
Of both, yeah.
So what they do is they'll take retail discs of the game and they'll rip the backgrounds as the image format that they are on the disc, and then they take that, convert it into PNG, JPEG, whatever, and they feed it into an AI, and the AI takes that original background, and then for every pixel it sees, it'll quadruple or maybe times 10 or whatever it is.
Right.
And what they'll do for this, I know specifically, talking from the guys who ran the Seamless HD project, is they sort of super sampled it, where they upscaled it bigger than it was actually going to be on screen, and then shrank it down to give it a more sharper, kind of detailed look to it. It's pretty interesting, the work that they did there.
It's fascinating what they do, because it genuinely looks amazing. Like the Resident Evil 1, it's a bit rough. Like you can tell that they're not working, because the original images are simpler and like it doesn't have as much to work with. So like what you end up with is this weird cartoonish sort of look to it. Yeah. But with 2 and 3, like wow, the detail is fantastic. Like it genuinely looks so clean and sharp. Like
especially on 3. Yeah,
it's a double-edged sword for me though, man, because I love it's insane the quality of detail that's there, and seeing the things that I passed over all the time as a child in high quality. I love it, but there's also the part of me that's like, I still prefer that granulated, pixelized background, where like my imagination fills in the gaps.
That's what I was just about to say. That it's the same as like how people always say the movie never lives up to the book. When we look at pre-rendered backgrounds, there's a lot of filling in the gaps that we have to do. And when someone fills in those gaps for you, you obviously run a risk, because like, that's not how it looked in my head. You know what I mean? Those lines didn't intersect in that way to me. My nostalgia has this looking way different than what you have here. So I'm right there with you, but I think the technology is what I'm more interested in, for sure.
But the pre-rendered backgrounds, it's the other thing that I love, is like I said, it gives your brain an exercise. You you look at it, and your brain is filling, your imagination is filling what you think you're seeing. That's why I love 3, because 3 had more visceral environments. It wasn't just the RPD. So you go to the city streets, you see corpses everywhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of visual storytelling as well. Like you see the aftermath of things that have happened, and you don't know exactly how it played out, but you just kind of have to guess. And again, like you say, your brain fills in the gaps, and it's a fun little exercise. Like whether it's like you go to the RPG and you just see like a handcuff hanging from the wall. It's like, what happened there? Did the guy escape? Did the police let him out at the last second? You don't know, but it's just a fun little thing that's there. Some artist drew that thinking like, people are going to chew on this and think about it. I like that.
And that's why I give respect to, like, because there's still games nowadays that do that too. It's all just visual storytelling. I learned that term from Valve, man. That's why I love, one of my other favorite series ever is Half-Life. Like those guys were ahead of the curve. They knew, like, visual storytelling is where they really implemented that, words when they made Left 4 Dead. So that's why there's a lot of sections in the game as you're playing it that they just put out the stuff out there and let you determine what's going on. Even with the hand scrawled notes that are on the wall in the safe rooms, that lets you put together a story in your own head of what's going on. And that makes something that much more engaging when I can actually contribute to the experience.
For sure. My mind immediately goes to that one section, the very start of Resident Evil 2, after you've gone through Kendo's gun shop. And it's that one section where there's like, the camera is back here and it's like a diner or something, and there's somebody slumped over the table. There was like a car accident right next to him. And he has arrows sticking out of his back or something, like long, thin, like rebar maybe. And I always imagined to myself like the car hit the thing and then rebar just splintered out of cement, like stabbed him in the back or something.
But I thought he got killed on the bottom of a chair.
Okay, so see there exactly.
See,
that's
everyone
why
draws something from it.
That's why they work so well. But then when you have someone that goes in and upscales it, it sort of takes away that second process your mind goes through, and it almost looks less real, even though it looks now more visually appealing, I guess. But realistically speaking, and as far as our brains are concerned, like we didn't put those details together in our minds, so they just don't feel as there and real.
No, I get it. The other one I was going to ask you about, I don't know how you feel about this, but the Revelations series was like this little fun offshoot that Capcom tried to do. And I really, because I did a review of Resident Evil Revelations 2 not that long ago. And I was very impressed by that game when I replayed it, because it felt like they were trying to take a little step back into the old Resident Evil formula, a little bit away from the action-packed, gung-ho, Resident Evil 5 and 6 kind of idea, but still keep the graphical upgrades. And I was always interested, like, what could have become of that series, because I know ultimately the mainline titles kind of went back in that direction anyway.
Yeah.
But I was always curious what you guys' opinions were of the Revelations games.
Well, the direction the current line is going, I think Revelations will come back around to maintain it back into the survival horror aesthetics. It looks like they're falling back in the same pattern again. Now that we did 4 remake, now we're doing 5, it's still going to be action oriented. So a small spinoff with just strictly horror based would actually work right now.
Yeah, it definitely would. I remember when I first played Revelations 1, it was here in Tokyo. Me and my wife were visiting. We went to the Capcom bar, and one of the servers came up, and it was amazing. It was really cool. We had there was a tyrant steak, and it was like a short rib steak, and then they would come and use a blowtorch on it in front of you, like they're killing it with a flamethrower. What the hell? It was super cool. It was so dope. But she came up and she's like, "Yeah, do you like Resident Evil?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And then she had me come up to the bar and play a 3DS with Revelations 1 in it. It was a really cool experience. But what blew me away is it felt like equal parts maybe RE4's aiming and over the shoulder perspective with RE1's sort of level design and crisscrossing, backtracking sort of gameplay, puzzle solving and item management, like all this stuff I really got into. So it felt perfect to me at the time. And this was before RE2 remake came out, which is, I feel like, probably a better combination of those two elements. But for when it came out, that was like, for me, exactly what I was looking for, because I knew that they weren't going to make a fixed perspective survival horror game. That, like, we'll never see that again from Capcom. But at the very least, we could get, these table scraps. I could subside off of that alone. So I was pretty stoked on that. And I was kind of disappointed when Revelations 2 came out, and just the same way the mainline series did, it veered more into the RE4 kind of action style. And it's like, God, you speed ran the whole turning into an action franchise with Revelations in just 2 entries.
I actually never got into I think Revelations 1 is the only one I actually haven't touched out of the entire Resident Evil series. By the time that one came out, it came out after 6, right? Or just before 6?
I think so. I forget, honestly.
Yeah, because right around that time, right after 5, actually, well, the seal of the deal is when that that terrible 4th movie came out, the Afterlife, the one that first had Chris. I checked out the Resident Evil series because I just saw, like, hey, this is not going in a direction that I liked. This isn't the Resident Evil I grew up with. So I quit. I just stopped following it. I had my bands to contend with at the time. But I actually circled back. The first game that I came back into playing before they even announced to remake was Revelations 2. And that was only because Barry was actually a playable character this time around and not a mercenaries character.
I got you.
So that I thought was interesting. It just felt, to me, it felt a bit too forced, too on the nose of them trying to be like, did you feel like The Evil Within was a bit too going heavy into the horror aesthetic?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
you see
no,
bodies everywhere. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It feels like a horror movie set that someone purposefully made to be
Yeah.
scary, as
It didn't
opposed to
feel
like in Resident
subtle.
Evil games. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
this happened, and I believe that this is a thing, and now we're seeing the side effects. When you have chains hanging from the ceiling, you know what I mean? Like,
It's like, come on, man. Like you're trying too
mm,
hard in that, and that's what kind of took me out of the experience. So
for
after
sure.
the first episode or two of Revelations 2, it was kind of a bit of a
Mm.
chore.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I get that.
I'm always a stickler for dialogue. Like the early dialogue in the RE games, yeah, it's cheesy, but that's what they were
Mm,
doing.
right.
But then when it's still cringy, but trying to take itself seriously is what I saw in 2,
Mm,
Revelations 2.
right,
Like
right, right.
the fact that Moira kept cussing all the time, she's on the radio, it's like, oh, shit on a stick. I'm like, what are you guys even trying to say now? Like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
hate it when
just
people try to write teenagers. Although I will admit, I liked Moira as a character. I think I got
yeah.
that teenage angst in me. Something about it. I like her.
No, as the characters themselves, the way they behave is fine. Just some of the
Mm,
dialogue just kind of off put me too.
yeah.
But
Honestly, Rev 2 is a pretty fun gameplay experience,
yeah,
but like you said, the whole thing just feels like really forced. Like they were
it
trying to
does.
make a horror game as opposed to making a game that's scary and let me decide whether or not I'm terrified by it.
I do have an idea for what they could do for Revelations 3, though,
I'm sad.
because I think we have too many side characters that they made that we don't get to see much of anymore. I mean, we
Sure.
remade Carlos. Let's
Mhm.
bring Carlos back into the mix. So
Love it. Yeah.
Revelations seems to me like just make that a side story, like
Mhm.
a continuous storyline that just happens to the backbeat of the main franchise.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's bring Carlos back in. Let's set this just before the events of 6. Carlos, he's definitely going to have to come in contact with Chris at some point. He wants to join the BSAA. And let's change the setting to South America, into the jungles of South America, because we
There you
haven't
go.
really seen that environment in Resident Evil yet. There
Yeah.
is the Operation Javier, but that was an on-rail shooter. It doesn't count.
Mhm. Yeah.
And set it to where, like, all right, Chris is like, hey, we're just starting at the BSAA, but we got reports, we got word received of BOW activity in the heart of the jungle in South America. The BSAA doesn't want to go in. No one wants to touch it because it's inside warring rebel territory. There's factions of drug lords. It's a hot spot. No one wants that shit on their plate. So Chris is like, I want you and like a small man team to do a recon down there to see what's going on. Get down there, see what's going on, report back to me. In and out, just see what's going on, snap some pictures, call it a day. And we can pull in from like influences from Predator, just flying down there, but it turns out to be much worse than an in and out response. And to me, because I've lived down in Brazil, I went down to the Amazon.
Yeah.
The jungle at night in a rainstorm is fucking terrifying.
Terrifying. Yeah.
It can be terrifying. Now throw in some BioW fucking creatures out there, you got yourself a storyline.
Well, listen, let me put this out here, because when you mentioned the BOW storyline, it kind of reminded me of the CGRE movies. And I've been toying with this lately. I'm writing a video covering Death Island that recently came out, or recently in quotations. I'm kind of finished with Resident Evil as a storyline, though. I don't think there's anywhere else to go from here. It's done about everything that I think it can do, in my opinion.
I think once we got to the level of Terra Grigia, where you
Oh my god,
giant floating cities and orbital space lasers, I just think
stakes have been raised too high. Maybe
how did we get from a creaky old mansion up in the mountains to this?
I think because we skipped a really integral story. Like Drinker, I know you called it out at one point. Like I still saw Resident Evil as it's half grotesque body horror zombies, and then the real evil behind it is the corporate corruption and like the cloak and dagger kind of conspiracy stuff. That was we never got to see that.
Yeah.
Well, I think Resident Evil 7, for example, proved that you can have a pretty compelling story that's interesting and draws you in, and it's really just a minor side quest in the giant Resident Evil narrative. I think that's why 7 was such an important game, because it took it back to, I don't want to go down the whole like, oh, it took Resident Evil back to its roots, because it kind of didn't. But
exactly.
It proved that you don't have to have like a world-ending threat in order to make a cool Resident Evil game. It can be something like fairly localized and contained. Just get a character or a bunch of characters who are interesting and have a compelling reason for being there. Throw them in with a bunch of bioweapons and like horrifying, body horror stuff, and you've got a great game. That's what Resident Evil is at its core, and that's why I think 7 works so well. It definitely had its flaws, and like fucking Ethan Winters is about as boring as a fucking porridge and water breakfast.
Dude, I don't know what they were trying to do with him either, because I think one of your video on 7, and it was interesting that you called it out. Like, well, what are you trying to do with this guy? Is he trying to be, a faceless, voiceless character like Gordon Freeman that we project ourselves onto? Or is he a character that has his own personality and traits? Because half the time he's very bland in his delivery of his dialogue, which is that supposed to represent like a neutral level? Or is that just the best you could get out of the guy's performance? Because then in 8, which is, all right, now this guy's clearly a character. He's clearly got an arc. He's got a storyline. Then treat him as a character. Why are you blocking his face out? Like, it's just this awkward shoehorn. They're just still tiptoeing on the line that they don't even know that they drew themselves.
Yeah, I don't think they could I don't think they could decide what they wanted Ethan Winters to be, and ultimately he became kind of nothing. And so I didn't really feel bad when he died, because it's like, well, I didn't feel like I knew who he was anyway, so he wasn't really a character. He was just an avatar for me.
He became the embodiment of milk toast. That is the personification of milk toast right there.
I think you're right, though. I think RE7 is a pretty good template moving forward. I mean, imagine instead of these being like continuous storylines that all intersect with each other, if it was more of like so every Resident Evil game didn't necessarily, it's not the same exact scenario, but they just follow themes. It's thematically similar. You have maybe a corporation, some sort of experiment gone wrong, some kind of virus, something in those lines, because even right up until the very end, RE7 has nothing to do with Resident Evil at all outside of the themes, because the mold is not, is not necessarily the T virus or anything. It's just some other unrelated thing going on, some other unrelated non-government entity that's messing around in the pharmaceutical area. Like that has a lot of legs, I feel like, and it doesn't have to be the Umbrella Corporation and Chris Redfield every time. It could be Jim and the Parasol Corporation, whatever it is. Just give me sort of things within that theme, because I don't think there's anywhere left to go. I don't think there's any ground that's left unsullied. We've pretty much, I mean, obviously there's side characters and stuff, but what are you going to have them do? Go to some U.S. city and then have an outbreak take place and then have them survive it?
I think that's what the animated movies have ultimately become. It's just like Resident Evil just referencing itself. Yes. It's like, hey, remember Rebecca Chambers from Resident Evil 1? Like, well, she's back and she's going to be in this new movie. Or remember
the rocket launcher from Resident Evil 1 and Chris is holding it?
It is just like, okay, we need a bit more than that, unfortunately. You can't just like be self-referential and expect us to care at this point, and especially if it's tied together by a boring as fuck storyline.
I mean, so to be fair, it would be really hard to write RE1 as a movie. It's not impossible, but I could do it right now. But it would be a tough sell, because it's a very slow building type of horror experience in Resident Evil 1, 2, and even 3 to a degree. It requires a lot of empty time where someone's just running around exploring a level. How do you put that into a movie?
I will say that
I think 2 and 3 I think would probably lend themselves much more easily, because it's like, okay, the virus is spread to a city, there's lots of zombies, there's lots of fighting, like, okay, fine, like that gives you a much quicker entry point.
But for a first movie, I mean, for that to work, I would say that to make it just entertaining purpose wise and keep a narrative flow, you wouldn't go directly to the mansion or the way the game starts off, out of nowhere. You do kind of have a bit of a build up, lay out some exposition. I will say that, the S.D. Perry novels kind of meet that halfway point, because she did a lot of the hard work. She took a game and turned it into a book. And all you got to do is kind of take that narrative structure, format it a bit, edit it a bit, revise it, and then you can turn it into a movie.
I never knew SD Perry was a woman, by the way. I thought it was a guy the whole time. I thought it was some dude.
I've only read the first one, and I only did it like the past month or two, and I was kind of impressed actually with how accurate she was to the first game. She literally describes each room in the mansion like perfect to the point where you can picture it. You know exactly where the characters are. She gives like justifiable reasons why people can't just shoot out the locks on every door that they need to get through because they're running out of ammo and stuff like that. And like there's just enough of reality that creeps in at times. Like say Jill has to like recover a crest that's inside a locked cabinet. Like there's one point where she just breaks it open rather than going through
without having to do the puzzle.
Rather than going through some convoluted like puzzle solving thing, she's just like, oh fuck it, I just need this, and then like hits it with her gun and breaks it open. Like that's it, fine.
See, I wouldn't say like adapt the book straight up, but just see what the revisions that the book did, and then kind of just piggyback on top of that.
Yeah.
And to me, I think a big issue, especially with the Welcome to Raccoon City movie, is that in my mind, what everyone's been doing wrong when it comes to making these movies is you're trying to adapt the game. Don't adapt it. Try to translate it, because video games and movies, they're like languages. They're two different languages. Instead of trying to, was that?
I was going to say it's funny looking at the adaptations that we've had of these games. Like they've each been progressively more shit than their predecessors, and so like we had the Paul W.S. Anderson movies with Mila Jovovich, and like we all laughed at them at the time, like, oh, this is fucking shit, and it's like it's nothing like the games. Then we had Welcome to Raccoon City, and it's like, oh god, this is so cheap and so cheesy and so low effort. And I think, well, okay, can't get much worse than that. And then we got the Netflix TV show.
Jesus Christ.
Good Lord. What has that got to do with Resident Evil?
That show was a sin because it wasn't even so bad. It was good. Like I could watch the Anderson movies and they're so bad. They're worse than the show, but the show is so bad in such a bland, nothing really happens kind of way. Like imagine you have the Resident Evil property and you have 3 scenes in an entire, 8 episodes or something? 3 scenes with zombies. I wanted to blow my brains out at that point. Like, we have 100% misunderstood what Resident Evil is at this point. If you could make several Resident Evil properties that almost don't have zombies in them.
I honestly think I remember the three of us, like if you gave us like a day and we just had like one computer to write out a script, we could probably come up with a better concept for a Resident Evil movie.
I mean, they're doing it right now with The Keeper's Diary, a movie that the fans are making with Chris from RE1 on the PS1.
I am so fucking jealous that they've got the original actor from Resident Evil 1.
I got him with them all the time.
I've got Charlie Kozlowski. He's in Carrier Raccoon City Story episode 2.
Oh, nice.
Really? Oh shit! I should have got in touch with him. We could have had him on here tonight as well. That would have been amazing.
I think they're actually still wrapping up, or they're still up north, like just doing like post-production partying or something. So, yeah. But because you recall the character of, we never see him in the game, but Michael Warren, the mayor of Raccoon City. Yeah. Since the only thing we ever see of that guy is a statue, Resident Evil 3. I'm like, oh, I could make that guy anyone I want. So I just reached out to Charlie, because he's good friends with Andy from Biohazard Declassified, who's my producer on the project. And I just like, hey, man, I want you to be – it's a fun flip of it, because Charlie is Chris. Chris is the good guy. Yeah. Mayor Michael Warren is the corrupt mayor, so he's now playing a bad guy. So I have he only does like one visual appearance. He's a face on a billboard that I put together. And then he does I got his voice recording to do like a news broadcast regarding one of the events in the game. And then in the post-credit scene of episode 2, I have a guy goes like Cosblade. This Mike is his name. He is the actor for Wesker, but I got Pablo Kuntz, who is the original voice actor for Wesker Resident Evil 1.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah, he's the voice. So both RE1 OGs are in episode 2 Carrier.
Damn, that's so cool.
because I watched Residence of Evil, like where they did the reunion of the original actors, and it was just such a fucking nice, wholesome,
isn't it? Yeah.
piece of footage. You know, just these guys who, like, a lot of them, I think, didn't even know until quite recently how big of an impact they'd had, like how big this thing ultimately became. And you know, suddenly it's like, oh, you know, like you've got millions of people out there who are interested to hear your stories about making this thing. What a cool thing for them to experience. And like,
for sure,
the fact that they were willing to do it, that they were still into it, they were kind of fired up to talk about it. I think that's so fucking cool.
It was
so
adorable.
nice to see.
Yeah,
dude, can you imagine that? Like being involved in something, which is essentially, they weren't even told the title of what they were doing. They were just like, dress up, be here, do that, and then that was the last I heard. And can you imagine, like 25 years later, finding out like this thing, like, no, this is a global phenomenon. This is a multi-billion-dollar phenomenon that you just happened to do when you were, 25 years old for pennies on the dollar.
I know, and it's like, man, all the appearances they could have made in that time, like all the fan events they might have done, like if they'd just been more aware of what was happening.
Dude,
like,
it's a shame, because I will say that, like, for at least the earlier titles, I really feel like Capcom did not give a lot of support to like the talent they found, like especially
just in video games in general. Yeah, that was
in general. Paul Haddad is, to me, Paul Haddad is Leon. He will always be Leon.
For sure.
And it struck me too. I read an interview with him, or it might have been one that Residents of Evil did, where they asked him, "What was your inspiration for Leon?" Oh, it was Indiana Jones and Marty McFly.
Yeah, fair enough.
That makes sense. Actually,
those are my childhood heroes. Like, that just made me love the guy even more.
Yeah.
Man. I was going to ask if you've got time, we could answer the super chats that have come in while we're still chatting away here.
Yeah,
sure.
All right, give me 1 second.
I don't want this moment to end. Any Resident Evil talk?
Oh yeah, dude.
It's one of those. Honestly, it's one of those things where I could be talking until the sun comes up about Resident Evil.
Sure.
It's just,
absolutely.
It just been such a fun part of my gaming life, I suppose. Like, it's hard to describe the kind of feeling you get from playing a Resident Evil game, particularly the old ones. But it's like putting on a comfortable pair of boots or something.
For sure.
Something that you're very familiar with, but you still get like a lot of enjoyment out of.
See, I do this thing when I play Resident Evil games. I never change what I always do. I always take the same route. I do the same thing, and I on purpose. Somebody will be like, "Hey, you could save some time if you get." It's like, no. I have a method that I go through.
I got my way.
It's the same thing. It's like putting on a comfortable pair of boots. It's the same with Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I have a very similar thing where I always do things in a set order because I'm comfortable with how that stuff works in that order. And it's just like, for me, it's like comfort food. It's a nice little escape to be able to do the same exact thing that I know exactly how it works.
I'm fairly sure that there are still certain cutscenes from Resident Evil 1 I haven't seen, because I haven't done the right combination of character events to make it happen.
Dude, that's the same thing for me and OG Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. There's even just now, there was someone who made a post on Twitter about a month or two ago about an event or sequence you could find if you play the game in a certain direction. I didn't like. I'm playing this game 20 plus years later, and I'm still finding out new things about it.
Well, there's a fucking great series by the Gaming Brit called The Road to the Rocket Launcher. And he discusses all the different the game design choices and the permutations of story and stuff behind it, and it's absolutely brilliant. Like the research that he put into that is
he does such a good job of showing each key, and that key leads to this key, and that key that's like a roadmap, but of the usable items in the game and where they lead. It's genius. That guy's so good with that.
Let's see what we got here. Northern English Bastard says you should check out the video of Ash Williams being inserted into Resident Evil Village, a crossover that needs to happen.
I can see that working.
Have you seen that?
I think I might have seen it, actually, yeah.
Oh, it's a fantastic video, especially when he first meets up with Lady Dimitrescu, and it's him being like, cringy, creepy Ash is like, hey, why don't me and you grab a bottle of champagne later? And
that feels perfect for that setting.
Yeah. The first thing you see is when it shows the castle. He's like, "Where the hell am
I?" Stephen Bobo says, Drinker, if you want to have a good discussion on the Resident Evil series, invite the YouTuber Ink Ribbon, Kai Morgan, on your stream. Yeah, I've seen a lot of Ink Ribbon stuff, and
good dude.
very good stuff. Yeah, very, very well thought out. He also says, Drinker and Avalanche reviews, if you were going to turn Resident Evil into a role-playing game, would you make it turn-based, action-based, or somewhere in between?
Damn, that's tough. You know, I feel like Resident Evil Gaiden on the Game Boy kind of plays it's not turn-based per se, but you kind of get into encounters like an RPG where you're kind of taken from the main map into like a sort of arena where things take place, and then it's like real time there. There's another game that does something similar called You Will Die Tonight. You Will Die Here Tonight. It's an indie game. I think it's coming out pretty soon. Really good stuff. But anyway, it's a very similar thing. If you get grabbed by a zombie, you're taken into a sort of almost, it's a first person kind of RPG screen where you could do things in real time, but it's a little more tactical and a little less, just press the button and the zombie dies. Maybe a little combination of that there. So maybe it's real time, but there's sort of RPG aspects that play into it. Maybe I thought about this a lot. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah. Skeptical Panda is asking us here, which is the ultimate waifu? Ada, Claire, or Jill?
I might be sounding like an old guy here, but what does waifu mean again? Just wife?
It's like Japanese pronunciation of wife.
Oh. Yeah. I'd say Jill, just because she was like the first one that Resident Evil, at least, that I had a crush on.
I think it might be. I think it might be Jill. Yeah.
Well, no, I take that back. I'd say Claire, because she has more of a punk rock background. Because I remember reading the S.A. Perry novels. At least, she rides a motorcycle and has a vest, you know.
All right. Yeah, I mean, like when you find out from the novels, like Jill was like a criminal, like a safe cracker and stuff.
Cat
like
burglar or something.
Yeah, like a master of unlocking, you might say. But yeah, like I never really took to Ada that much, and with Claire, I got put off by the new character model they gave her in the Resident Evil 2 remake. She was so weirdly like, I don't know, it's like they tried to give her too much of a baby face or something.
Yeah,
I just didn't like her look.
She had a very toothy way of talking. She had like a lot of these showing all the time.
She did look young though. I will say she looks like, an actual teen, like she would be her age, 19. Unlike
that makes sense,
Welcome to Raccoon City, but
yeah,
and she does. I mean, like that is what the face model for Claire in RE2 remake. I mean, she does look exactly like that. And then seeing the face model talk in interviews later, it actually kind of, when I go back and look at Claire now, I'm like, okay, I see it now, but it did kind of put me off before. I'm right there with you.
She has chipmunk cheeks. Yeah,
she does.
That's
it.
She's got
apple cheeked sort of character.
Yeah.
Bit of a young Jennifer Lawrence kind of look about her.
I don't know if I could choose between the three, to be totally honest with you. They all, if we combine the three together into the perfect My Woman, probably, but they all have aspects of personalities that I really like.
I like in our background here, like I like our windows here. I've got the best part of Ada right here.
You do. That's true.
I think we all do. Yeah. But one thing I'll say is about, like, because I talked with about this with the woman who plays Annette Birkin in Carrier, Jordan. That's her name. I've known her for about 15 years, and she's the only other person down here in Florida that really knows a lot about Resident Evil. We both agreed that Claire's direction after Code Veronica just feels kind of pointless. Like, she became this bureaucratic kind of character. She's working, she's doing like the whole fundraiser, and like I guess she's with Terror Save or something. Yeah. To me, that's not Claire. Claire is a rebellious, like, wild child. She rode a motorcycle. She had like a leather jacket. So
yeah, I mean, like a lot of the characters end up being time locked in a weird way, but Revelations 2 was one of those weird games where it's like it actually acknowledges that quite a bit of time has passed from Resident Evil 2 when she comes into the series to now, and it's like she's very much an older woman by that point. She's more mature. the character model looks completely different. She looks really weird, but definitely.
Is that the one where she looks kind of like an older Claire Danes or something?
Something like that, yeah. It's like they definitely tried to age her up, and it fits with the role that she plays in the game because she's almost like a mother figure to Moira. But yeah, it felt like a bit of a weird switch with her. I didn't really see Claire going down that road necessarily.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so from a storytelling point of view, having one of the people who lived through that initial outbreak sort of take a more desk job sort of approach to preventing that from happening again. Because, I mean, it makes sense Chris and Jill would stay in the police force or get involved even further with some sort of tactical shit. But, Claire having no law enforcement background, I don't know. I get the narrative value of having that be the case, but as a person who really liked Claire as a character, I don't like seeing her go into that I'll only draw a gun if I have to kind of thing. Like, I want her to be like, no, let's get in there and stop these guys, and less like,
dude,
well, let's
your older
see
brother
if we
is
can put it in
Chris
front of the Senate.
Redfield.
Yeah. He punches boulders. Fuck them.
Yeah.
The next super chat's from Kevin O'Neill, who says, thoughts on the film Silver Bullet, 1985 werewolf flick starring pre-accident Gary Busey, also creeping up on 2 million subs. Wouldn't that be a banger way to end the year? It would, I suppose. I'm not going to gain 150,000 subscribers in 2 months, though. That ain't going to happen. But yeah, Silver Bullet, I remember it doesn't have a kid in like a wheelchair or something, and like Gary Busey gives him like a super boost to his chair to make him like really fast, which just seems wildly dangerous to do to a kid.
Oh my Gary God, Busey, you're right.
But it does seem pretty on brand for Gary Busey, though.
Yeah, it's like he like pre or post accident, like he just did whatever felt right at the time. So yeah, I've got vague memories of the movie.
The Spanish poster for that movie is the kid, and his wheelchair is converted into like a chopper.
Oh yeah, that was
like a lowrider.
Blue Collar Loser says, going live later reviewing Trick or Treat, dressing up as Luke's soy walker, blue milk ready, going to most of the movie and tell people that I hate my nephew. Well, it's on brand, so yeah, go for it. Daniel Morales says, happy Halloween, drinker. Greetings from the United States. Thank you very much, man. Appreciate it. Silly Raccoon says, look out, drinker. Kathleen Kennedy is going to get you. I've been reliably informed she's under my bed right now, so yeah, better watch out.
Gonna get you.
Yeah. OMG Puppy says, happy All Hallows Eve. Thank you, man. Not Your Average Fan says, been watching you for 3+ years. Resident Evil is my top 3 video game franchise. What is your favorite stories and opinion on Code Veronica? It's one of my faves. What are your opinions on 7 and 8? I don't like them. So 7, like we were just kind of talking there, I think it was a useful game to bring Resident Evil in a little bit after the wild excesses of 6, which was just that took the Resident Evil 4 formula and just took it to its most illogical conclusion.
Honestly, I think 7 relied a bit too much on cultural references for there to be any kind of like grounded story. It was like, hey, remember all this scary stuff? Did you guys like that movie Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Yeah.
Hey, remember that scene with the family on the diner? Hey, you guys like Evil Dead, right? Well, here's a groovy reference with the chainsaw. It's just it didn't feel like it had its own personality. So it was like to me, it was Capcom just like, all right, we hear what you all said about 6. We know we got a bit too carried away. So here's a game that's like, look, it's just like the Spencer Mansion, the main hub. Look, it's got that antler staircase. There's all these horror movie references. Please come back to us.
I think as well, like as much as 7 was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 8 was Van Helsing. It was like all this gothic horror stuff with werewolves and vampires and stuff, and it just felt again so far removed from Resident Evil. It was just ridiculous. And yeah, I didn't like the idea that they tried to build Ethan Winters into this like really fleshed out character when he absolutely isn't. JJ Cash Money says Resident Evil 5 was the last game I played with my cousin before his passing. I know Chris was his favorite character, good memories. Drinker looks like Chris.
Oh yeah, dude.
Thank you. I need to bulk up clearly though if I'm going to play Chris.
Yeah, my condolences to you though, buddy.
Yeah. And I think with a long-running franchise like this, it's always interesting to hear people's like personal stories, like the connections that they have to these games with family members or friends or whatever. And I'm sorry very much for that you lost your cousin there. Weeb Addict says the tyrants in Resident Evil are my favorite. Not says what's that? Not says run than a big buff silent grey man that can crush a man's skull like a grape.
Nothing says run like a
nothing
big
says run. Yeah, I think that's why I always find Mr. X more intimidating than Nemesis, because he doesn't make a noise and he doesn't really have a rocket launcher strapped to him or anything. He just comes at you, and
more
you
like
can.
a force of nature.
They could have made Nemesis terrifying, because look what they made Mr. X into. That entire experience with him in 2 Remake, to me, when 2 Remake was announced, that's what brought me back into Resident Evil. And yeah, I was ecstatic for like the first week, and then by the end of that week, the only thing I could think is like, okay, now what are the odds of Resident Evil 3 getting a remake? And if they do that, what's that going to look like? And then playing 2 Remake and seeing Mr. X, by the time I finish that game and I can catch my breath, the only thing I can think is, how are they going to top that? Thinking that they were going to top that.
Yeah, I was about to say, no, they didn't.
This is Kyle, says Avalanche. I would like to thank you for your Resident Evil retrospective. Because of it, I decided to play through the games, first time for most of them, chronologically on my channel. Started with 0 and currently on Revelations 2.
Nice. I love hearing that when people are like, for the first time as an adult or whatever, I'm getting into Resident Evil. Like, fuck yes, that's killer. Hell yeah.
Just thinking really quick, there aren't any games chronologically on the timeline that take place before 0, right? 0 is the first.
That is the first. Yeah.
That's interesting.
What's the next one? Mo Lester says the Resident Evil movies are better than the games. I don't agree.
Them be some fighting words, buddy. Them be some fighting words.
I mean, it depends on the context. If you're having a bunch of friends over for drinks, you'd probably put the Anderson flick on before you'd put on Resident Evil 1, maybe.
I mean, I think we can all collectively agree that it's not a great movie, but the first Anderson film to this point is probably the only good live action Resident Evil film out there.
I actually would put the second one above the first.
Well, yeah. What I mean is
recently I've become a part of that camp. I become team second one, and I used to be team first one until I recently watched the first one again, and it's not as good as I remember it being.
No.
And the other thing I do want to say on that end is, to me, it feels like the first Resident Evil movie never got the sequel that it deserved. Like Apocalypse, it's don't get me wrong, I love it. It's a guilty pleasure now. But Apocalypse doesn't feel like the sequel that should have came after that movie in terms of style and aesthetic. And obviously it's because they got a different director. You know, they had Alexander Witt instead of Paul Anderson, because Anderson was doing Alien vs. Predator. But the style and the aesthetic of that first movie, a lot of like the tension, the build-up scenes, you know, I remember watching as a kid and wanted to see like, where is that kind of style and tone going to go when you put it into a city?
Yeah.
And instead, it was like there's this transition of tone that didn't really quite mix well, or it doesn't reflect where it came from. But I don't know if you guys ever felt that.
I will say this: if there's one valuable thing the first movie ever did, that last scene where the camera is zooming out on Raccoon City, and like that the newspaper blows across her leg, says "The Dead Walk." That's always been a thing for me as zombie movies. I like newspapers blowing in the street. So that was perfect.
Did you guys ever listen to, like, because I remember back in the day, the thing to do when you got a movie on DVD wasn't just to watch it, but to watch it with commentary.
Commentary.
The director commentary, the actor commentary. And I remember I watched that movie back and forth, the first two, because I didn't buy the third one.
No.
But listening to what the inspiration was, and that the dead are walking, that newspaper, it's taken, that whole scene is taken from
Day of the Dead, I assume.
Yeah, a lot of Day of the Dead references in that one.
Yeah, it's it's weird with those movies because like you every so often you see like a little reference to the games, like a little glimmer of Resident Evil, but like there's no context behind it. It's just like they took like 5 minutes out of making the movie to go play the games and thought, oh, that little moment there is cool. I'm going to put that in the movie. I don't know where it came from or how it relates to the main story, but who cares? I'll just put it in. And it's
it strikes me as the people who are putting the scenes together, the story writers and such, that their only experience is literally reading like the back of the fucking box and seeing the pictures.
Kind of what it feels like, yeah.
And maybe playing like the first 5 minutes.
I've said this before, but I think the big issue with making a Resident Evil movie is finding writers that don't have an ego, because anybody who touches a Resident Evil script is going to assume this is bad writing. I have to fix it. And you know, the point of buying a property and adapting it to film is you're purchasing everybody's experience with that movie, with that story, and that's the story that they want to see, you know, put on film. A lot of writers will see that and they go, well, I'm a big movie writer. Obviously, this is not good. So I'm going to make it good in my estimation. And we end up with all of these Resident Evil movies. All these people think like, oh yeah, I've improved on this story. Now, the rest of us, we just want a Resident Evil story. But every writer who touches this thing and director thinks like, no, we have to make this good. It's already good. Just allow it to be on film. That's
it's like, it's good, but in its own unique way.
Yeah,
I do.
So I can make it better.
Well.
I if I put them together, if I put the first two games together, it's both at the same time.
Of course.
Yeah, I agree with this one as well. Sienna Gilroy was Jill Valentine. Great potential there, kind of wasted. And instead they made Mila Jovovich the main character. Yeah, like Alice was just a fucking nothing burger of a character, intentionally so. Whereas, like, you've got a good actress playing a popular character. Why not just use that? That would have been so much better.
And like she just did a good Jill.
Yeah. She did. I remember the listening to the documentary, or not the documentary, the commentary on Resident Evil Apocalypse, which sounded kind of awkward because, like, they said it's all the actors, but it clearly sounded like Sienna Guillory was like recording her lines at a different time because she wasn't interacting with everyone. But she said that she tried to incorporate to play Nemesis on the PlayStation because that's was way back when, and she would try to incorporate little like physical hints, like, oh, I noticed that when the character is just standing idly, she'll kind of stand there with her hand on her hip, tap her gun, kind of just like, hey guys, let's go. And it's like, okay, you know, clearly maybe you had the game sitting there while you're doing something else, but you played it enough, you researched the source material enough to get that.
That's the kind of approach that we would like to see in Resident Evil movie making.
Whereas with Welcome to what?
I was going to say, I honestly want to see the actors in a movie just delivering their lines and only gesticulating with their left arms like they do.
Oh my God.
Keeping their hand in this motion right here and doing a lot of these.
We have to go over here.
I'm not going to lie. I talked like that a lot too when I was a kid for the game. I would enunciate the way they did their stuff, and at friends, I'd be like, yeah, let's go. And then after a while, I was like, why are you doing that? Like, what?
Growing up in a Cuban household, a lot of hand animation when you're talking.
Here's a question for us all from Arigato. Says, for the panel, what are y'all's best times for Leon on hardcore for Resident Evil 2 remake? Mine is 1:24:58 apparently. I have no idea what mine is.
I've never beaten 2 remake on hardcore. I feel so lame.
I've only ever beaten it on the time it took me to get some of the unlockables, like the unlimited ammo guns. The thing is, I'm not a big fan of the speed running. I mean, much respect to the people who do it. To me, it breaks the immersion factor because to speed run, you gotta memorize, you gotta plot out every single aspect of the game. So you gotta know, all right, where this enemy's gonna be there, this enemy's gonna be there. I know that, but I don't like forcing myself to know that because then the game is no longer fun. I play the game for an experience. There's people that play for that rush, to beat the clock. Hey, if it's a race for you, it's fine. But for me, I can't because it ruins the experience. And I'm not watching a story anymore. And I'm just playing. Well, I guess I'm playing a game at that point.
Well, I think as well, like when you crank the difficulty up to hardcore, it's like that's just it's like you're very much just gaming it. Like you're having to exploit every little weakness in the game's code in order to get the most out of it. And it's like that's not a fun experience anymore. That's just playing the percentage.
But I do like hardcore adding the ink ribbon save feature.
Yeah, that is. I like it when they tweak difficulty in a Resident Evil sense. Like making like items less, plentiful, as opposed to making HP values higher or lower or whatever.
Just making sponges.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Speedrunning is amazing, but when I approach specifically a Resident Evil game, I'm not doing it to like finish it really fast, but I'm doing it to actually just enjoy playing it.
Yeah.
Obdulio says Resident Evil 2 Remake has so much of the game removed from it. The B-side is completely butchered and so many players giving unjust praise compared to Resident Evil 1 Remake. That is one thing that pissed me off, actually. The B scenario in Resident Evil 2 Remake is fucking non-existent. You're just playing the exact same game again. I don't understand why they did it like that.
I think
to the point where you're like, it's so lazy you're even fighting the same boss again in the same way. Like, how does that work?
I think the B scenario kind of explained that's what really shows where they start to get crunched for time. Because I'm one of those people too that like, oh, this is great. This is a great game. This is the best. It's right up there with the first remake, if not even better. And once that ecstatic, that excitement kind of died down, and I got to really see the game for what it was, like, wow, there was a lot of that B scenario is like the biggest sin of them all.
Yeah, no, there definitely was a lot missing, but I think that shows more than anything how they were working on 2 and 3 remake at the same exact time, and they thought it would be a much easier process. So it was supposed to be a package deal. You're supposed to get 2 and 3 remake together. And I think they had announced RE2 remake, and it had been so long that we all thought it was vaporware for the longest time until we actually got the teaser trailer and stuff.
We do it.
Yeah, we did, exactly. But there was so much time in between the we do it announcement and us ever seeing anything from it. And I think that they were so rushed to actually get 2 remake out. And that also explains why 3 remake came out so soon after 2 remake. But it's like they couldn't finish the game essentially. And both games essentially are unfinished.
They were repeating the same mistakes they did. And I should know, I did the same thing when I was putting out the 3rd episode. I was repeating like mistakes I did before, but it's like, dude, you're supposed to catch yourself before you do that. And it's just disappointing. And yeah, I mean, that B scenario, it's like, that's why the B scenario is actually, I think Leon B scenario is my favorite scenario.
I could see that. Yeah.
Well, you get to, I think from what Capcom said, like Claire A and Leon B is like the canon version of the story anyway. So yeah.
But to be fair, a lot of people aren't going to know that because how are we supposed to play in that direction when literally you open the case and Leon's CD is the first one you see?
I always play Jill first in RE1, Leon first in RE2. There's something, I don't know why, that's another one of those things where it's like, that's what I did then, and that's what I'm going to keep doing because that's what I'm comfortable with.
Wait, you played Jill first?
Yeah, always play Jill first, always play Leon first. They're like the main characters of those games as far as I'm concerned. The other ones
Jill first because she had the gun, man.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. More inventory space. Come on, forget about
more inventory space. Barry helps you out. You don't even have to fight Plant 42. Barry just flamethrowers it.
Yeah,
and Jill automatically knows chemistry, and Chris doesn't.
Well, she can even play the piano.
Yeah. I love how it says Chris can't read music.
Well, I can't either, so that makes a lot of sense to me. If I was in the Spencer mansion and they're like, you have to play this piano, I'd be fucked.
And that circles around to another, not that the movie's full of fucking errors and sins, but it circles around to another major sin that they could have fixed in Welcome to Raccoon City. There's the piano puzzle. Granted, it's Wesker and Jill. Why doesn't just give that scene to Jill? Give us at least that much.
I love how they tripped over themselves to give you so many worthless callbacks, and then they fuck up the one thing.
The thing I gotta say too, like, because they were, to me, the one thing that I think like Welcome to Raccoon City kind of did it. The game did it okay too, but the aesthetic of the 90s was still lost on it. And I'm not trying to have it shoehorned in my face. It's subtle. No attention to detail.
Yeah, have it look like a period piece and not like a exploitative thing.
Yeah, like don't shove it in my face, but just show me like what it was like then. And then Welcome to Raccoon City felt like it was trying so hard in that to even shoehorn references in. And then there's Brad sitting in the helicopter on his phone playing Snake. Oh, great. I get it. Yeah, because that's a reference to the Snake. But he's playing on a fucking Nokia phone. I'm sorry. Did we forget the fact that cell phones back in 98 were fucking expensive? And this is a cop in a city that is pretty much damn near on its way out. How the fuck does he afford that, let alone what's the phone doing out in the middle of nowhere? The phones didn't work jack shit back then either, in the middle of small town.
Yeah.
Sorry, stickler for details on that.
No, I get it. Matthew Pickard says, hey, this has got nothing to do with Resident Evil, but what did you guys think of Robin Hood? Or should I say Robin Hood?
Nope. Didn't watch it because I thank you and your hard effort of watching and reviewing it, so I don't have to.
There you go.
I think I want to see them get 10 seasons of it. I think it sounds fantastic. Do it, Director X. Albert Nada Retro says, if you want to visit the live action Raccoon City, just take a trip to Toronto, Canada. That was our city hall that the CGI blew up.
Dude, wow. I went there. It was my first trip up to Canada about 2 years ago. We flew into Toronto. It was me and my fiance and her parents that picked us up. We drove through. I found out years ago where those shooting locations were, and we went to the that's the City Hall location right there in downtown.
Oh, that's so dope. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. David Morris says, I've only played Resident Evil 4 and never completed it. Tragic, I know. Well, what are you waiting for? Go and do it now. We believe in you. You can do it.
No time like the present, dude.
Yeah, you're never too old. Frosty the Terminator says, first off, happy Halloween. I've always said that Resident Evil 5 is like if Michael Bay was hired to make a Resident Evil game. Very happy Resident Evil 7 brought back Resident Evil to its horror roots. I mean, I agree. It definitely scaled things back. And
now they're right back where they ended up at.
So they definitely, like they downscaled things for sure. But I think bringing it back to its roots is a bridge a little too far because they just dialed back the ridiculousness a bit. And I think it shows a lot how far things had gone with Resident Evil, that Resident Evil 1 or 7's like fairly ridiculous events look so much less ridiculous by contrast.
Yeah. It felt like a trick, man. Honestly, it really did. Because like I said, I checked out of the series. I didn't even, I saw news of 7. I saw like the whole consensus was, it's bringing it back to its horror roots. And I just thought, well, that's nice, but I'm sorry, you ain't going to fool me. And then they did the 2 remake, and I saw that was like, okay, I'm actually back in Resident Evil now. Yeah. And then they announced Resident Evil 3 remake. Okay, now you got me in. And then they started releasing the screens, the leaked images of the sets of Welcome to Raccoon City. There's the RPD, fucking the gate. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'm back in Resident Evil again. Then 3 remake dropped. Then that fucking movie dropped. And then they announced Resident Evil 4 remake, and I'm like, all right, you guys clearly just wanted the people to come back in to get the money, and you're back on track with what you're doing.
Yeah, we're not exactly eating well right now.
Yeah.
Ryan Sakima says Five Nights at Freddy movie is mid at best. Whoa,
makes sense.
Honestly, that Nick Cage movie, the
Willy's Wonderland.
That's your Five Nights at Freddy right there. That's the one.
I genuinely love that movie. It's so fucking stupid and so ludicrous.
I love he doesn't say a damn word into it. And even when he's on break, it's like, I'm in the middle of a fight. No, I got to go back to drinking energy drinks and playing pinball.
Yeah. You won't interrupt his break for anything.
Yeah.
And I just love like when an animatronic like animal comes to life and starts fighting him, he just immediately goes into combat mode. He doesn't think for a second, what the fuck is this? What's going on? He's like, no, I need to kill it right now. It's great. Jeffrey Hallam says Resident Evil 1 gave me some silly ideas as a kid. I thought we were supposed to store ammo and first aid stuff randomly around the house. To this day, I feel like I should store spare mags under furniture.
I mean, there's a lot of people who would agree with that. I mean,
oh yeah,
I may or may not have weapons hidden in very random spots in my house right now.
Only spots that I know. I got the ammo clip hidden behind the giant.
You just got to turn the painting a certain way, or turn the dial to the specific date that you were born.
I'm gonna make everything in my house insanely difficult. Like you want to make a cup of coffee, you've got to like retrieve like 5 crests from different parts of the house and like put them into a machine or something.
That's the ultimate masculine urge.
Yeah.
Oh, what's that? You want to get to the cold cuts? You got to fight a boss for that one.
Yeah. Judy Hopps says, plot twist idea. The chief is a good guy, but doesn't believe Jill or Chris because their blood samples reveal green herbs and the squad was high.
I mean,
you grew actually up with that for sure.
Yeah.
I just noticed that now. Like there was a reference to that kind of idea in the book that in S.D. Perry's novels and like the sequels, when it's in the Raccoon City situation, I think Resident Evil 2, she says like they write them off as being high on the job, being on substances, and like, you know what, they're taking green herbs a lot.
Yeah,
makes sense. But I think they kind of did try to play him off as a good guy in the Welcome to the Raccoon City movie too.
Baby Arms says, worlds have collided. Jared, drinker, carrier, love to see it. Happy Halloween to you all. Yesterday for people in Tokyo. What did you watch this year?
That's a very good. By the way, Baby Arms, what's up, dude? How you doing? I don't know, man. I never watch anything ever. It's been so long since I've been really interested in movies or TV shows. I've been watching.
Just keep it that way. Keep it that way.
Yeah, I know. I've been fucking. Jesus Christ. I think the last like modern thing that I watched was the Resident Evil show, and that might have sworn me off of modern media for a while.
I mean, as far as like modern horror stuff, I don't really see. I'm a sucker for nostalgic shit. So we've actually been every year for Halloween, we always rewatch this show. I love it. It's called Over the Garden Wall. It's a nice like fall time Halloween cartoon show. It's really goofy, but it's also pretty fucking creepy. And I just rewatched old episodes of like Goosebumps or like the Halloween episodes of Nickelodeon shows like Doug or Rugrats or like Courage, especially Courage the Cowardly Dog, dude. That show's
genuinely creepy is what it is.
I definitely fall into the comfort zone of like old horror movies like John Carpenter's Halloween. Fucking Nightmare on Elm Street, Poltergeist, love that one. Event Horizon.
I don't like a lot of like pure horror, but stuff like Event Horizon, kind of psychologically tinged horror. I'm more into Jacob's Ladder, like existential horror, I guess you could call it. I'm super into that stuff. I don't watch a lot of slashers or anything. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, of course, I've seen all the prerequisites, but it's not like a genre that I go back and like really enjoy a shit ton. But like more slow building stuff, like the first Alien movie, obviously The Thing. If it has like a bit of that kind of psychological nature to it, I'll probably be a little more into it.
I think Room 1408 is probably one of the last good adaptations of a Stephen King story. Wasn't that Stephen King? He wrote Room 1408.
I don't know.
That's the one with the movie stars John Cusack, and he's
that's right. It's like the kind of ghost story type of deal.
He's a ghost story writer, and it's based off a short story. I think it's written by Stephen King.
Interesting. I never knew that.
Just because he used to be on top of his game, and he hasn't really been doing much good stuff lately.
Yeah, definitely.
Just hanging out on Twitter, being pissed.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Just never stops. Vinyl Morpheus says, I'm here to defend the honor of Ethan Winters. Give the Giga Chad his due. I think it's because he's not an action hero that he's awesome. A dad who's scared, but he doesn't back down. Based and mold pilled.
I'm not blaming Ethan as himself. It's just Capcom didn't know what to do with him. That's what it comes down to for me.
Yeah, it started out, they're like, oh, we want to self-insert. But then when the second game in the series came, they're like, well, we can't do that again. So
yeah, so just make him the blacking out of the face just doesn't. I don't get that.
Yeah, and then you kill them off, and it's like you're trying to give him this epic arc spanning a grand total of 2 games.
Yeah,
in this enormous series, it's such a weird like little detour narratively.
And then they sort of devalue it because in the Shadow of Rose DLC, he's
like a ghost.
Yeah, so I mean, it sort of feels like you kind of ruin a person's sacrifice if in the next one you bring him back again.
Much like a similar character by the name of Han Solo.
Oh no! Don't mention that name. Yum Yum Eat 'em Up says, "Happy Halloween, y'all. Resident Evil is one of my biggest franchises. Thoughts on rumors of Resident Evil 9 going the controversial route of possibly killing off a major long-term character? Not a fan if true. I can see them killing off Chris. I can see
do it.
doing it.
Just get it over with. It's long overdone at this point because what else can you do?
I mean, depending on which character it is, I feel like that's probably an appropriate place to take the story. It makes sense.
I can't say who I think they should do it, but just one of the main characters, man. Just done, one and done, and don't do
don't feel too bad about it. They will bring them back eventually.
Yeah,
so it's not like this is not permanent. We do not have to worry.
Yeah. Tanu Kirishi says, "Hi, Drinker. I'm from Ecuador, and I've consumed every video since your Resident Evil uploads. Oh, thank you. Couldn't believe that Devil May Cry is basically Resident Evil 4's child reject. The generator is my favorite. What's yours?" So yeah, I mean, it's so funny that like that was their concept for Resident Evil 4. Didn't really work as a Resident Evil game, so they thought, "Fuck it, we'll just turn it into its own franchise by itself."
It was Shinji Mikami who convinced him to like, listen, this is not Resident Evil, but it's good. You have to release this. Just retitle it, and it's great.
And you know what's interesting? It's crazy if you play through Devil May Cry. A lot of like the areas in the game where you pick up an item and it shows you like the camera will pan to this one spot where it's a locked door. The way that camera does it and the way some of the sound effects roll, it's exactly the same way in Resident Evil 4. A lot of the music is still the same from Resident Evil as well. I think there is one or two tracks. I want to say like the song that is in like it's like kind of like red glidey menu that you have in Devil May Cry. The song, one of the tracks taken for that in the early levels is the Marshalling Yard Part 2 from Resident Evil 2.
Oh, really? Interesting.
But there's a lot of
really cool.
Yeah,
it was a PS2 game that essentially had like pre-baked camera angles and stuff. Like
they're still doing fixed camera angles on it, which is still fits the narrative. It still supports the argument that you can still make. Granted, it's dynamic camera angles, but they're static fixed.
It can be done. Yeah, absolutely.
It can be done with visceral action.
The DNA is there.
It can, in a modern day, we could have a Resident Evil game and it would work perfectly. They just are afraid that it won't.
Devil May Cry is a visceral action version of it, and the Until Dawn is the, classic survival horror search and explore static of it.
Oh yeah, I did enjoy that as well. Actually, I'd like this one as well. Did you ever earn the Infinite Launcher or Magnum from Resident Evil 1? I spent forever figuring out.
I found it by accident.
Yeah, if you complete the game in under 3 hours, you get the Infinite Launcher, and that was great. Great fun. Really turns the game on its head when you've got that.
Well, I didn't even get it like legit. I would always get it from a Game Shark. I don't think I ever actually earned. I mean, it's not a problem at all. But back then when I was playing Resident Evil, it would take me a really long time to beat RE games.
Same. It took me like a few years, but Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 3. I got those on PC, but I got them bootleg down in Brazil. So I go to a flea market and I remember like printed out on like faded ink paper was the Resident Evil logo, and the CD was just written on with a marker. So I got that. I played it on my PC and I played over and over and over again just for the sake of playing it over and over again. And I would get faster and faster. And then at one point I beat it. And then when you beat on that certain time, you get the launcher, the rocket flies across the screen after you beat it.
It does. Yeah.
I remember seeing that, like, what did the game just glitch out or something? And then it tells me that I won the launcher. I'm like, I won a rocket launcher for free? And then I see that, Jill gets an Uzi, unlimited ammo. Chris gets like the saw, unlimited ammo. I'm like,
those are PC specific too. Those weren't in any of the console.
Yeah, because there was no Uzi in the original PS1 game. I replayed it recently, just a few days ago, and I thought I was getting a pretty reasonable time, and it was like 4 hours and 20 minutes. And I thought, fucking hell, I thought that was going to be well under 3 hours.
Oh yeah.
God damn.
And just to give credence to how much more the remake had on GameCube, I remember playing it with Game Shark or Game Genie at a friend's place, like the first year or two that it came out. And with cheat codes on, it took me 4 hours to beat that fucking game.
Oh, there you go.
God damn. Psycho Crusher says, please don't bring up Resident Evil 6 again. That game never existed. I'm fine with
I
that.
don't even think we talked about it.
So
Yeah,
here's
we
the
just
thing.
kind of glossed over it.
So I I hate RE6 in terms of a Resident Evil game, but it is honestly kind of fun. Like,
honestly, I watched your review, Jared. Your review is what convinced me to try to give the game another go.
Yeah.
It's not a good Resident Evil game, but it's a fun game. And that to me was like, you know what? I'll give it a go.
I mean, it's stupid. Yeah.
It's stupid, but the biggest problem to me was if you pick one campaign, you have to stick with it all the way through. So I started with Chris's campaign, got a few levels in. I'm like, let me just switch over to Leon's campaign just because I want to play the zombies. I'll get that over with. I played Leon's, got a few in, and I'm like, you know what? I want to switch back to Chris's. Got completely eliminated.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was playing it wrong, but all my progress in Chris's campaign got erased. So I had to go one campaign at a time.
I never tried going from one to the other. So yeah, I don't know.
I just like Leon's probably felt like the best or the most Resident Evil-y because you actually fought zombies. Chris was just like playing Gears of War or something. It was so over the top.
I mean, Leon's campaign, take out the really awfully paced areas, like in the cave underneath the church and stuff. You could have made an entire game out of that, really and truly. I mean, that was the only thing that we had seen at that time that brought us back to like the idea of Resident Evil. There was a zombie outbreak in a major city and you're running around, cars are crashing, you're seeing the chaos, people are turning. Like, I'm good with that conceptually, but realistically that campaign was so badly paced, and it was Resident Evil 6 on top of that, which makes it really awful.
And it led to the memes that Leon is a terrible driver because literally everything he gets in the drive, he just crashes it.
Yeah. Next one is Red Dawn says, what do you think of the CGI movies? Vendetta was my favorite. Chris and Leon kicking butt. Death Island was good. Damnation is also great. I think that personally, like, I always saw the movies as being pretty weak from a story point of view. Like, they were obviously scared to like upset the balance because none of these things are meant to like change the fate of the Resident Evil universe. They're just like in between. Death Island was okay, I guess. It was the one where like characters felt most like themselves. But it was really just like an extended video game cutscene. So
Death Island felt like it did this. It opened up this can of worms to me that, okay, up until this point, the CGI films have been primarily based on the actual games themselves. So they exist within the game's universe. So the Chris that we see in like Vendetta, that's supposed to be the Chris that we know from 5 and 6, right? So then they shoehorn in Jill from Resident Evil 3 Remake, like with her model and everything. It wouldn't be so much an issue if they kept Julia Voth's description, her physical appearance. That would have made more sense. But then they shoehorn in the design with the same fucking outfit too for some reason. And
she hasn't changed her clothes in like 20 years. It's amazing.
I got really pissed off in Death Island. Her pants go up to like her midsection, but the zipper goes at an angle, and it fucking pisses me off so bad. I don't know why. Every time she was on scene, all I saw was this zipper that started from like her hip and went up to her like love handle. It was killing me.
But like Death Island did that thing, like, because every other character has pretty much existed within the CGI film universe. And then they brought Jill in and just felt like, you know, it's like if you were to take like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man movie, like a sequel, and instead of Tobey Maguire's Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. Granted, they come from similar backgrounds, but it's not the same person. It's like it just felt off, and it felt like this doesn't really gel well because that Jill that I'm seeing and the voice actress, I didn't see what they went through, you know. I can't relate to them. There's no personal attachment to them from what they went through.
I think the CG movies are kind of everybody sort of agrees that they're the better Resident Evil movies, and they are, but it's like that's not a high bar to clear because they're still really stupid. You know, even the best CG animated Resident Evil movie is like the dumbest movie ever made, but just that's our level of quality that we're trying to beat is like the Anderson films. So I mean, obviously you would have to physically try to be worse than that. they're good. I like the CG movies, and they are way more entertaining to watch in a this is a fun and stupid kind of sense, and not in a, like this is so bad that I can't help but love it kind of sense, like with the live action films.
Honestly, I will say there's one CGI film that I think actually reigns supreme over them all.
Okay.
That's the very first one. That's the 4D Executor.
4D Executor?
Yeah.
Interesting.
That one is like Resident Evil meets The Thing, because there's
Yeah.
like this giant, it does the same thing that the creature does. It just absorbs everything.
Really good ending too.
Really good ending, yeah, which they never followed up on.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever see that, the 4D Executor?
No, I don't think so, actually.
I remember they made that was right around the time that they made the first Final Fantasy movie, when it was a CGI.
Oh, Spirits.
It was before that.
It was before that, yeah.
Executor was a sort of interactive kind of thing. They wanted it to be in very, very small, not even in theaters, but these like rooms they could rent out, like pop-up shops kind of deal. And they would have like 3D glasses and stuff, and they would have like the little air vents on the back of the seat and stuff like that, and the little ones by your feet. So when the roaches would be crawling around in 4D Executor, you would kind of feel around your ankles and stuff. It was really interesting. They were trying to make it more like a carnival ride kind of thing than a movie, and that's why
40X days.
Yeah, that's why we never really got it here in the West, is because they couldn't transport that into like the West. That would cost a lot of money, and then afterwards, like, why would you just watch a DVD of like 15 minutes worth of a thing?
Yeah. Last one here is from TJ Jordan, who says, A Nightmare on Elm Street, the OG, is a classic. I love to return to it every Halloween alongside Alien.
No.
Good choices, sir. A man of culture, I see.
I gotta love like the one scene where she's in a dream sequence and she's in like a neighborhood alleyway or something, like a side alley, and you see Freddy Krueger's there and just kind of comes like skippering over to him.
Yeah.
Weird.
Stuff like that is great. It's just like so weird, visually disturbing. Wolf's Pain says, ironically, I'm currently playing Resident Evil 2 Remake Leon B. There you go. Well, I hope it's...
which is essentially Resident Evil 2 Remake Leon A, because there's no difference between the two.
You'll probably be done quicker, though. So,
but yeah, that's the last of the Super Chats this evening. I want to say, Jared and post-apocalyptic George Michael, to both of you guys, I want to say thank you for coming on for this stream tonight. I really appreciate you giving up a couple hours of your time. It's been awesome to talk to you. And well, I mean, for everyone who's watching this, the links to both of these guys' channels are in the description. And if you haven't subscribed to them already and you're even remotely interested in Resident Evil, I do heartily recommend you give both of them a follow, because they produce just great content. It's so awesome to listen to. And I guess, like, if you guys have got anything coming up you want to make the audience aware of, like, now would be a great time, I suppose.
Oh, my cat's yelling at me.
Yeah.
Your cat's reminding you got that one thing coming up, man.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I have anything. I try to release videos every 2 weeks, and right now I'm playing through Alan Wake 2, but it's going to take me a while to sort of compress all that down into anything that makes sense. So yeah, if just maybe every 2 weeks ish, take a look at my channel. There'll probably be something up there. That's about it.
I will say that progress on my channel is just relatively, it's not as consistent as like every week or two, because I take time in between every episode to write it out and to get the story going. I've also got other projects I got to manage as well. Like literally after the stream is done, I got to head out to go play a show with my band. But outside of the music thing, episode 3 is coming on my end. God, I actually had the name down. I didn't even write it down yet. But that one, since I got the formatting and the process down after this last episode, I actually got a better understanding of it. It's not going to take a year or over a year to get to it. But episode 3 is going to be on its way too. And there's going to be more fan favorite characters appearing in it.
Nice.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I want to say thank you to everyone who's super chatted us this evening, to all my channel members and to the mods for doing the awesome job that they always do. Appreciate you guys for everything that you keep doing to keep everything ticking over. And well, that's pretty much all we have for tonight. The next time you see me will be on Open Bar on Thursday night. But for now, that's all we've got for today. So go away now.
Go away now.